Good afternoon, everybody. Please be seated. Prior to starting with routine proceedings, I'm going to take this opportunity to make a special statement. Part of the reason is because we had a little baby that was really active a few minutes ago who is now sound asleep, but well, I guess we'll see how long that lasts. But I would like to draw everybody's attention to the Speakers Gallery, where we have with us today Michelle Lapointe Dixon, her husband Anthony Dixon, daughter and son-in-law Marissa and Victor Toth, and son and daughter-in-law Nick and Sam Thompson, along with their son and Michelle's grandson Cooper, Michelle's sister Patty Sanregret, and her best friend Lisa Branconier, and her favorite retired co-worker Joanne McCurley-Coral. After 31 years with the Legislative Assembly, Michelle will be retiring as the Speaker's Office Administrator on June 30th. Michelle started with the Legislative Assembly in the Clerk's Office in February of 1992 as a sessional employee. She went on to become a full-time employee in the Clerk's Office in 1997 until she moved to the Speaker's Office in August of 2006. While in the Clerk's Office, Michelle spent many a day waiting for committees to be announced in the House, changing committee membership listings, and assisting and calling presenters when meetings were announced. Michelle also spent many years organizing speakers and special events for each new group of interns. When she moved to the Speaker's Office, she quickly became the right arm to every speaker she has worked for. She is the constant in the Speaker's Office and runs the office like a well-oiled machine. Her knowledge of the Office of the Speaker, the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as a whole, the people who work in the building, and the work that goes on in the House have made her an invaluable asset to every speaker she has worked with. She is exceptionally well organized, knows the role of the Speaker, and is the heartbeat of the Office of the Speaker. She has ensured that the office is always held to the highest standard and always looks out for the best interest of the Speaker. She has a quirky sense of humor, a calm demeanor usually, and is the voice of common sense and reason. She makes anyone that comes into our office feel welcomed and at ease. 20 of her 31 years were spent commuting 2 hours daily from Winnipeg Beach to the Legislature and back each day. So when I tell you once she is determined to do something, she gets it done. Michelle has seen 7 provincial elections, 13 by-elections, and the government changed 3 times. There have been 5 different speakers in her time, and she has worked directly with 3 of them. We had Hansard do a search for us of the past 30 years, and the word order has been used a remarkable 25,700, give or take a couple hundred times. Considering we sit on average of 70 to 80 days a year, Michelle says since she is retiring, she can say this: do better and be easier on her boss. Michelle has been instrumental in many projects in the legislative building, from helping to get the MACE case installed to helping with the design of Legislative Assembly staff service pins as well as the new MLA pins. She has organized speakers' conferences, visits from ambassadors and special guests from other countries, and did so with professionalism. She has been my representative on the Legislative Building and Grounds Advisory Committee and Secretary of the Legislative Building Restoration and Preservation Committee. However, the biggest project of them all was helping and seeing the creation of the Legislature Portrait Project located on the first floor that covers every legislature since 1871. Any person in any job can be replaced. However, losing the knowledge that comes with 31 years experience is not as easily replaceable. So Michelle, from all of us here, good luck on your retirement. We know you're enjoying looking forward to that time in your backyard with your family, and we wish you the very, very best in your retirement. And I think Cooper woke up. And we have some other introductions, but I will save that for later in the afternoon. So routine proceedings, introduction of bills, committee reports, tabling of reports, ministerial statements, the Honourable Minister of Sport, Culture and Heritage, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 27(2). Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with his statement?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to acknowledge this summer as the 40th anniversary and the Board of Directors of the Gimli Glider Museum. This small group of volunteers set out to create a museum to preserve an important piece of Manitoba's history, the story of Flight 604. They have accomplished this and much, much more. On July 23rd, 1983, Flight 604 from Montreal ran out of fuel halfway to its destination of Edmonton, Alberta. It was seen by a few as it glided silently and ominously to make an emergency landing at the former Gimli Royal Canadian Air Force Base. The runway had been converted to a motorsport racetrack, and there were still races occurring on that very day, making the landing even more dangerous. 161 passengers and 8 crew members were on the plane that day. Captain Bob Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintel safely landed the plane with no serious injuries and only minor damage to the aircraft, as it was given the famous nickname, the Gimli Glider. In July 2008, the Gimli Glider was officially retired from its service. In May 2015, a small group of visionary individuals from Gimli set out to preserve the piece of aviation history. This led to the creation of the Gimli Glider Museum, which officially opened its doors in 2017. The museum provides compelling and interactive exhibits which include authentic aircraft seats, which I tell you are very, very small compared to the seats now, from the same flight model, and virtual simulator, which allows visitors to try their hand at actually landing Flight 604. I've had the pleasure of visiting this awesome heritage museum in Gimli, and it comes highly recommended. The museum now hosts thousands of visitors annually from across Canada and around the world. This summer marks the 40th anniversary of Flight 604, the Gimli Glider, and the board has planned a celebratory event on July 22nd at the very Gimli Airport where it landed, on the very runway where Bob Pearson and Maurice Quintel set out their emergency landing. Madam Speaker, it is my pleasure to dedicate the efforts of the board members of the Gimli Glider Museum. And their dedication is so much so that they were supposed to be here today. However, I don't see them. I believe they are still attending a conference right now about museums in Winnipeg. So they were delayed on their arrival here, but I do want to acknowledge them for their work they are doing. If you are out and about in the Interlake region, please take a moment to stop by the Gimli Glider Museum at the Lakeview Gimli Resort on 10th Street Centre. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kuwait-Nook.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On July 23rd, 1983, Air Canada Flight 143 made headlines as what later became known as the Gimli Glider. When the Boeing 767 successfully executed an emergency landing in Gimli, Manitoba, due to an unprecedented fuel measurement error, the aircraft ran out of fuel mid-flight, forcing the pilots to navigate a perilous situation. The emergency landing took place at the former Royal Canadian Air Force Base, which had been converted to the Gimli Motorsports Park. Now, nearing 40 years from that day, it is crucial to recognize the remarkable skill and fortune which turned a potential catastrophe into a story of triumph. The ability demonstrated by Captain Robert Pearson and First Officer Maurice Quintel, who maneuvered the massive aircraft safely to the ground without any engine power, exemplifies their exceptional skills and resourcefulness. The events that unfolded highlighted the importance of effective communication and teamwork at all levels. The flight engineer and air traffic controllers played a crucial role in calculating and relaying critical information to the pilots before assisting them in their decision-making process and ensuring the safety of everyone involved. The Gimli Glider incident served as a catalyst for change in aviation protocols and procedures that exist to this day. It prompted improvements in training programs, equipment, and safety measures, underscoring the significance of learning from past experiences to prevent similar incidents in the future. Taking a moment to acknowledge the Gimli Glider incident, it is truly remarkable that there was no severe injuries. The unwavering professionalism, dedication, and ability to overcome adversity that was shown continues to inspire and influence the aviation industry today. Nearing the 40th anniversary, let us remember the Gimli Glider as a testament to human ingenuity and an unwavering commitment to safety. May we continue to learn from such an extraordinary event while we work to foster a safer future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I ask leave to speak to the minister's statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, it's important that we recognize today the Gimli glider and its pilots. July 22nd, 1983, almost 40 years ago, on a flight from Montreal to Edmonton, Air Canada Flight 143 ran out of fuel. It was above Red Lake, Ontario, and some distance from any airport. They looked at the possibility of landing in Winnipeg, but it was too far, and so Gimli was chosen. The error on the fuel was a series of problems which arose, and cumulatively they led to this situation of the aircraft having not enough fuel. Gimli, at the time, was a former Air Force base. It had been used in the Second World War as part of the Commonwealth pilot training program. The base since had been converted to a racetrack complex with a road race course, a go-kart track, and a drag strip. Captain Bob Pearson, an experienced glider pilot, and his co-pilot, the first officer, Maurice Quintal, managed to land the plane, a Boeing 767, successfully. And by great good fortune, those at the racetrack at the time escaped injury. There's now a museum in Gimli to recognize the remarkable landing of the aircraft in Gimli. It is interesting to note that several attempts by other crews who were given exactly the same circumstances in a simulator in Vancouver all resulted in crashes. What was achieved at Gimli was exceptional skill by the pilot and co-pilot, and is a historic event for all of us to remember. Merci. Miigwech.
Further ministerial statements. The Honourable Minister of Families, and I would indicate that the required 90 minutes notice prior to routine proceedings was provided in accordance with Rule 27(2). Would the Honourable Minister please proceed with her statement?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm honoured to stand before you today as the first minister in Manitoba responsible for gender equity. On Tuesday, we announced that the Manitoba Status of Women Secretariat, the Family Violence Prevention Program, and the Manitoba Women's Advisory Council have undergone changes to better reflect the needs of Manitobans and our commitment to inclusion, diversity, and equity in the province of Manitoba. The Secretariat, known as Gender Equity Manitoba, will expand to address the concerns and issues of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. We recognize that there is an increasing need to provide community-specific services to this community. Gender Equity Manitoba's enhanced mandate will provide a more consistent and dedicated response on issues involving the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, and we look forward to collaborating with the community and all those who are dedicated to supporting gender equity across Manitoba. The month of June is dedicated to the celebration and commemoration of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community, and Pride Winnipeg annually organizes many amazing events across the city that provide individuals, families, and friends a place to celebrate as either members or allies of this community. On Tuesday, we had the pleasure of announcing that Gender Equity Manitoba will be providing Pride Winnipeg with a $250,000 annual grant through our new granting initiative. This grant will allow Pride Winnipeg to hire 2 staff and support Pride activities and events in the many communities across Manitoba throughout the year. We will be at Memorial Park tomorrow at 1:30 for the raising of the Pride flag as the kickoff event for this year's festivities. We look forward to seeing many of you there, and I wish everyone a happy Pride.
The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Every June we celebrate Pride Month here in Manitoba and in many countries across the world. Pride Month is a time to celebrate and acknowledge the 2S LGBTQ+ community's historical and ongoing fight against discriminations. The origins of Pride Month can be traced back to the Stonewall Uprising in New York City in June of 1969, where trans, Black, Latina, and other LGBTQ community members fought back against discriminatory police raids. This incident led to days of riots and sparked the gay rights movement in America and across the world. The first Pride Parade in Winnipeg happened 35 years ago as an impromptu celebration over the NDP government's decision to include sexual orientation in the Manitoba Human Rights Code. Pride Month is a celebration of our community. Unfortunately, this year we're still angered by attempts being made to silence 2S LGBTQ voices by banning books from libraries across Manitoba. Our community members have been bravely standing up to these hateful attempts to erase our stories, and we celebrate the victory in Brandon. But the PC government and this premier have been notably silent in this fight. Instead of having a government that celebrates the 2S LGBT community and takes action to stop hate and discrimination, we have a premier who didn't even walk in the Pride Parade last year. Manitobans deserve better. They deserve a government that is willing to stand up for what's right when human rights are threatened. To all members of our 2S LGBTQ+ community, know that the Manitoba NDP will always support you with
the member's
words
time has
and
expired.
with actions.
Order. Leave has been requested for the member to complete her statement. Leave has been denied. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for leave to speak to the ministerial statement.
Does the member have leave to respond to the ministerial statement? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I proudly rise today to recognize June as Pride Month in Manitoba and across the world. Here in Winnipeg, Pride starts tomorrow and will run until June 2nd with the Pride Parade. I'm proud to say my friend Jim Kane marched in the first Pride Parade in Manitoba. But not only throughout June, but every month, we proudly stand with the 2S LGBTQ+ community. We honour and recognize their resilience and ongoing pursuit of equality and acceptance. I remember the bitter fight over same-sex marriage. I remember Jean Chrétien's saying, we don't have referendums on minority rights. While great strides have been made to finally recognize same-sex marriages, equality, and diversity rights in Canada, I would be remiss not to mention how much more work needs to be done to ensure safety and acceptance of the community. Just this week, an attempt to ban inclusive, diversity, fact and reality promoting books in libraries was rejected. It was a direct attempt to silence the community in Brandon while really labeling and leveling terrible accusations at allies. A school in Winnipeg had its pride flag stolen along with 2S LGBTQ+ and Indigenous books. We must condemn these acts and recognize that this reflects why we have to continue to keep fighting and recognize the universal humanity of all people involved. I was very vocal in my opposition against this proposal. Thankfully, due to extraordinary popular support, Brandon Division School Trustees voted down the book ban, but the vote was not unanimous. I do think the PC government could have shown more leadership in making their position clear. We need to do more to support and uplift individuals of all sexual orientations and gender identities as we see a rise in hateful rhetoric from the far right.
The member's time has expired. The member has requested leave to complete his statement. Does he have leave? Leave has been granted. The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Just silence the queers in this house.
This rhetoric is harmful to a community in which many already feel they are on the outskirts of society.
Order!
They are human beings worthy of dignity and respect. Manitoban Liberals vow to do our part in continuing to be proud allies and celebrating all Manitobans. Together, we continue to champion love, respect, and equality for all, not just during Pride Month, but every day of the year. Happy Pride, Manitoba.
Member statements. The Honourable Minister of the Honourable Member for Selkirk.
Madam Speaker, I rise in the House to bring awareness of a unique museum located in Selkirk, Manitoba. For many years, travel by boat, ship, barge, and canoe were the main methods to transport goods, mail, teachers, doctors, nurses, tourists, and residents to all northern communities around Lake Winnipeg. In 1972, 51 years ago, the Selkirk Marine Museum began the process to preserve and exhibit this unique history. Canada's only prairie marine museum, it hosts 6 ships that once navigated Lake Winnipeg. Visitors are free to climb on board, explore the ships, and have a hands-on experience. Feel what it was like to stand on the decks of the 125-year-old SS Kenora, built in 1897, the Bradbury, the Chickamauga, the Lady Canadian, the Peguis, and the Joe Simpson. Without the preservation of these ships, a unique piece of Manitoba's history would be lost. Thanks to the ongoing support from our provincial government, the museum is able to continue to provide restoration and new programming. It is an exciting day trip destination for the entire family, not just nautical enthusiasts and historians. This year, evening tours, historical tours, and themed birthday parties are offered. During the year, the museum hosts an authentic dinner where guests are served one of the traditional dinners that passengers once enjoyed while traveling on the Kenora. Visitors can also enjoy a pancake breakfast, a model boat show, a Halloween haunt throughout the season. We invite all Manitobans and tourists to attend our museum and enjoy experiences that are unlike any other, building a sense of connection, belonging, and pride that honors Manitoba's marine history. The general manager of the Selkirk Marine Museum, Shailene Nordell, was devoted to 20 years to preserve our nautical history. We are extremely proud of her efforts and results, and I ask my chamber colleagues to please rise and recognize Shailene Nordell.
The honourable member for Notre Dame.
The Premier has been cutting public schools for years. Now we've learned that they have a plan to cut school funding by millions of dollars for thousands of kids, including a $2 million cut to Winnipeg School Division if they are elected this fall. We can't afford to give the PCs another chance to cut schools.
That's right.
Manitoba kids deserve the best. That means small class sizes and a teacher who can give each student the one-on-one attention that they need. It means a classroom with EAs and resources, plus a warm meal for kids who need it. I've recently spoken to teachers who were told that all social worker positions will be cut for their school this coming fall. Social workers are essential in providing support to kids so they can be safe and have the resources that they need to do their best at school. I've also recently heard from 3 IB high school students who are devastated that their school will not be able to provide international baccalaureate programming next year. One IB student said to me, "Why are they doing this to us when we have only 1 year left to graduate and we've been working so hard to succeed?" The PC government promised the development of a new education funding model, but now they've delayed the release until after the election. The Manitoba NDP has obtained a slide deck marked confidential for the funding model review team that shows the difference between current funding levels and the model's new levels for each school division. Some divisions will see their annual funding cut by millions of dollars. Seven Oaks School Division cut by $11 million. St. James Assiniboia cut by $8.5 million. Winnipeg School Division, $2 million. Louis Riel cut by $10 million. Lord Selkirk cut by $7.5 million. Interlake School Division cut by $3 million. I'll say it again. Our Manitoba kids deserve the best public education that we can provide for them. As a parent of 2 young boys in a public school, I'm happy to be proved wrong. Prove it to me and release the new education funding formula today.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture.
Madam Speaker, today I would like to recognize and express my sincere gratitude and admiration for the individuals involved in the creation of the Arborg and District Multicultural Heritage Village. Nestled by the Icelandic River, this little village has transformed an empty field into a living testament of the rich cultural tapestry of the Interlake region. Back in February of 1999, a grassroots organization held their first meeting with the ambitious idea of constructing a heritage village. 3 months later, the Arborg Heritage Village was incorporated, and since then, Pat Elson, along with the dedicated board of directors and volunteers, have embarked on an extraordinary journey. With the village now spanning 20 buildings, over 12.9 acres, and nearly a quarter of a century later, the Heritage Village serves as a tribute to the diverse culture that have called Arborg and its surrounding area home throughout the years. With each building and its contents representing Icelandic, Indigenous, Ukrainian, Polish, along with many, many more, visitors are granted a glimpse into the rich heritage that has shaped our community and the Interlake region. Completing such a monumental project is a testament to the unwavering dedication and perseverance of the board of directors and volunteers who have poured over 55,000 volunteer hours into this endeavor. The Heritage Village has not only become an economic driver in our community, but also a gathering place where cherished memories are made. Madam Speaker, I asked my esteemed colleagues to join me in extending a heartfelt appreciation to Pat Elson, the board, and every volunteer who has contributed to the preservation of this unique chapter in Manitoba's history. Their collective efforts has ensured that the Arborg and District Multicultural Heritage Village stands as a beacon, showcasing the beauty of diversity and the power of community spirit.
The honourable member for Fort Garry.
Madam Speaker, since the establishment of the PC Venture Fund in April 2022, this fund has been plagued by questionable decisions and a complete absence of results. First and foremost, it's alarming that the board appointed by the PCs to oversee the fund lacks any experience in venture funds. This raises serious doubts about their ability to effectively manage the fund and make informed decisions. To add to the growing list of concerns, no investments were made from this fund in all of 2022. Despite the allocation of substantial financial resources, not a single Manitoba company has received support or created a job since the announcement of the fund in 2018. Instead, the only transaction involved was granting $25 million to Westcap Management Limited, based in Saskatchewan and run by Grant Cook, to establish a venture capital fund for Manitoba businesses. The decision to have a Saskatchewan-based firm administer Manitoba funds raises eyebrows regarding their commitment to our province's economic growth. Grant Cook is a controversial figure who's administered a similar fund in Saskatchewan and lost a significant amount of Saskatchewan taxpayers' money. It is alarming that this PC government would entrust Manitoba funds to someone with a record of such failure. It is evident that the PC government has failed to safeguard public funds and ensure accountability. The Connect Manitoba Growth Fund, which focused solely on established companies, does not support new or emerging enterprises, hindering the growth of our local economy. As elected representatives, our duty to hold this government accountable. The lack of transparency and apparent financial gains of individuals connected to this venture fund raises red flags. Manitobans deserve better. We must demand answers and put an end to this reckless mismanagement of public funds. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Order. The honourable member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, establishing and providing stewardship for ecological corridors in Manitoba is needed. Protecting islands of habitat is not enough. We need to provide corridors so that wildlife, including mammals and birds, can have paths to move from one habitat to another. For 2 years, I've been involved in looking at designating an ecological corridor along the Little Saskatchewan River in southwest Manitoba. An ecological corridor along a river with varied landholders, including many farmers, needs to involve people in the corridor in decision-making and will require funding. Fortunately, the federal government has already announced it will provide such funding. On May 7, I hosted a forum to look at the potential for an ecological corridor on the Red River from the U.S. border to Lake Winnipeg. Steve Strang, former Managing Director of the Red River Basin Commission, provided a perspective on the Red River north of Winnipeg. John Orlico, City Councillor for River Heights, Fort Garry, talked of the situation within Winnipeg. Ryan Sheffield, Manager of the Pembina Valley Watershed District, spoke of activities needed to work with farmers, at the same time enhancing natural areas while supporting the farmers. Merle Ballard, Director of Indigenous Science with Environment and Climate Change Canada, spoke of the need to involve the Indigenous community early on. Will Gooden, a minister with the Manitoba Métis Federation, spoke of the importance of ecological corridors and the ties that Métis have with the land. An effort is now needed to work with all stakeholders to knit together the existing efforts to have a designated ecological corridor along the Red River in Manitoba.
We have a number of guests that I would like to introduce to you today. First of all, I would like to start by introducing a special guest of the member for Point Douglas. We have here her daughter, McKenna Smith, who is pregnant with her first child and the member's first grandson, and they've joined us in the gallery today. So we would like to welcome them here. Also seated in the public gallery, we have with us Leanne Rowett, the former MLA for Riding Mountain, and Councillor Darlene Jackson from the municipality of Riding Mountain West. And we welcome you here. And we also have guests in the loges today. In the loge to my right, we have Cliff Graydon, the former MLA for Assiniboia, and in the loge to my left, we have the former MLA for... What did I say? Assiniboia. I'm jumping ahead. Let me start again. In the loge to my right, we have Cliff Graydon, the former MLA for Emerson. And in the loge to my left, we have Ron Costician, the former MLA for Swan River, and Stephen Fletcher, the former MLA for Assiniboia. And on behalf of all members, we welcome you back to the Manitoba Legislature. And seated in the public gallery from Riverdale School, Swan Valley Church, we have 14 grades 7 to 9 students under the direction of Tom Penner. And this group is located in the constituency of the Honourable Member for Swan River. And we welcome you to the Manitoba Legislature as well. Oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Today is the 2-year anniversary of the death of Crystal Musso. Crystal's life mattered. Her family deserves justice. I wanted to take a moment to honor this anniversary, a solemn event that marks the failure of our provincial healthcare system to deliver Crystal the care that she needed. On the subject of healthcare, yesterday we proved that the Premier has cut 87 rural paramedic positions since she took office. Today, we learned from the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals that ambulance response rates are now taking 30% longer in the Interlake and Prairie Mountain regions. Two are connected. When you have fewer paramedics, it takes more time for ambulances to respond in those regions. Will the Premier tell the House why she cut 87 rural paramedics in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, our hearts go out to the Musso family on the tragic loss of Crystal Musso, and certainly from this side of the House, we want to send our condolences to the family as well. On the issue of paramedics, Madam Speaker, I was pleased yesterday to join the Mayor of Winnipeg on an announcement of $54 million for ambulance service in the city of Winnipeg yesterday. That includes 2 more ambulances as well, including 20 more paramedics. Madam Speaker, on the front lines of ambulatory services here in the city of Winnipeg. We were welcome with the Chief of the fire and paramedics, Madam Speaker. We also welcomed those fire paramedic staff who work there on the front line. This was a well-received announcement yesterday, Madam Speaker, and we recognize there's more work to do. We'll continue to work together to ensure that those ambulatory services are there for Manitobans.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, I can tell you the Premier's announcement was not well received in rural Manitoba, particularly coming on the same day that we unveiled that this Premier, since taking office, cut 87 rural paramedic positions. Not only are the wait times increasing, and I'll table the documents that prove the case, but the number of vacancies has increased as well. Not only fewer paramedics working there to respond to scenes, the vacancy rate has increased by 30%. So this is a policy choice being made by this Stephenson government. Fewer paramedics working in rural Manitoba because of their decisions. And again, the 5 years with no contract for these healthcare heroes, that only exacerbates the cuts that the Stephenson government has made. Will the Premier tell the House why she continues to cut rural paramedic services in Manitoba?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, the only thing we cut were the incredibly high fees that Manitobans were faced to pay for ambulatory services in Manitoba. In fact, we cut those by 50%, Madam Speaker. That makes it much more affordable for Manitobans to seek those services that they need when they most need it, Madam Speaker. What I will say, of course, is that this issue remains in collective agreement negotiations right now. Madam Speaker, we are confident that those negotiations will come to a final resting place, Madam Speaker, to ensure that those individuals get to ensure that there's a fair deal reached by for those paramedics. Sorry.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, I just want to be clear. The fact that the Premier cut 87 rural paramedic positions since taking office as Premier, that is not the subject of negotiations. She's just trying to distract and avoid answering a serious accountability question. If you talk to people in rural Manitoba, they'll tell you that they're waiting too long for ambulances. And the reason why they have to wait so long is because these EMS services are short-staffed. We don't have enough paramedics working in rural Manitoba. So when one ambulance has to respond in community A, they don't have enough resources to then respond to that second call coming in from community B. I'll point out that the members for Lac-de-Bonnie and other rural constituencies are not raising this issue. They're not fighting for ambulance services in their community. All they do is they come here and heckle. The question that the Premier needs to answer to the people of rural Manitoba is why has she cut 87 paramedic positions working in their communities since becoming Premier?
The Honourable First Minister.
Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition continues to put false information on the record in the Chamber, Madam Speaker. The fact of the matter is we recognize that there is a shortage of healthcare workers in the province of Manitoba, nothing that's unique to Manitoba, but of course right across our country. That's why we've invested more than $200 million in a human resource action plan to attract more than 2,000 healthcare professionals, including paramedics, to the province of Manitoba.
Before proceeding to the next question, we have some more students in the gallery, and I would like to introduce them to you before they leave. We have 25 students, or around that number, from Ecole Edward Schreier School in Beausejour, with teacher Ilana Spencer, assistant principal Jamie Whitkey, and we welcome you to the Manitoba Legislature. And I should mention that they reside in the constituency of the Honourable Member for Lac-de-Bonnie. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a new question.
On the subject of schools, with the students in the audience, you know, we've long called on this Premier to stop her practice of giving checks from money that was meant for the K-12 system and sending that out of province to billionaires. The Premier actually said that Loblaws, hugely profitable company, would go out of business if she didn't give them a check for $327,000, taking that $300,000 from revenue that was meant for schools. But this isn't the only giant billion-dollar out-of-province corporation that's receiving PC government largesse. I'll table these documents that show that Walmart, at just 3 locations alone, is going to receive a check for close to $110,000. Just imagine what $110,000 could do at your local school, and then ask the Premier why she insists on taking money away from those K-12 institutions and sending it out of province to billionaires. Yeah.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I certainly welcome any question from the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite when it comes to affordability. And I'll remind the Leader of the Opposition that he voted against an increase to the basic personal amount from just under $11,000 to $15,000, Madam Speaker, and that takes more than 47,000 low-income Manitobans off of paying taxes in Manitoba. That is making a real difference in the lives of those Manitobans. Why did the Leader of the Opposition vote against that?
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a supplementary question.
You know, I can appreciate that the PCs are practicing for their turn asking questions, but I'll remind the Premier that the topic of the day here is education. Again, while the Premier is giving out these checks to out-of-province billion-dollar corporations like Walmart, which we've just shown is tapped to receive $110,000, again, that's $110,000 being taken from money that should be funding public schools in this province. At the same time, Manitobans are probably wondering, how are the PCs going to pay for this? Well, as our colleague from Notre Dame showed, they're going to pay for it with the new education funding model that is going to cut millions of dollars from school divisions right across Manitoba. We say it's the wrong approach. Where the PCs want to send checks to billionaires, we say, why don't we invest that in Manitoba school children instead? The question for the Premier to answer is why she's sending these checks out of province to billionaires.
The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And if the Leader of the Opposition and members opposite cared so much about the education of our children in this province, then why did they vote against our $100 million or 6.1% increase to the education budget this year, Madam Speaker? Those are real investments for our children and for their education in the province of Manitoba, Madam Speaker. If he cared so much, why did he vote against it, Madam Speaker?
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on a final supplementary.
You know, schools across Manitoba are being forced to cut teaching positions. They're being forced to cut teacher librarian positions. At the same time, these billion-dollar out-of-province corporations, you know what they're doing? They're making bank. Loblaws, $426 million in profit in just the first 3 months of the year. They got $300,000 taken from schools from this Premier. Walmart announced that in those same first 3 months of the year, they earned $141 billion in top-line revenue. $141 billion in top-line revenue, and yet this Premier wants to take $110,000 away from struggling schools in our province and to send that check out of province. It simply doesn't make sense. We need to invest in young people. We need to invest in education. We need to invest in youth in Manitoba. Why does the Premier, on the other hand, want to send resources that could go to them out of province to billionaires? Yeah.
The The Honourable First Minister.
Well, Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition says that we should be investing in education. That's exactly what we're doing, Madam Speaker. $100 million more in the operating budget for school divisions this year alone. Every single school division saw a significant increase in their operating budget this year alone, and almost a 23% increase since 2016 when we took office. That is more, Madam Speaker, not less. That's the operating funding. We've also invested in the capital side of things for 23 new schools, Madam Speaker. Under the Leader of the Opposition, the NDP, those students were being taught in portable units, Madam Speaker. We believe they should be taught in classrooms, Madam Speaker. That's why we're making those investments.
The Honourable Member for Union Station.
Madam Speaker, gender-affirming healthcare is just that, it's healthcare. And this week we saw the Premier announce a Gender Equity Manitoba Secretariat, and the backgrounder was posted online, and it included details on funding for Clinic Community Health Centre and the Gender Diversity and Affirming Action for Youth program. But neither the Premier nor the Minister mentioned this during their announcement or any time since then. Now, a new version of the backgrounder has been posted online, and that backgrounder removed the information altogether. Can the Premier explain why her government deleted this funding announcement from their press release without telling Manitobans?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Our government was very proud to announce the establishment and the enhanced mandate of Gender Equity Manitoba on Tuesday, along with a $250,000 annual commitment to Pride Winnipeg, so that we can ensure that Pride is organized. That is something that they never did when they were in government. Pride had come to that government year after year after year and asked for annual funding, and they got nothing from that side of the House. On this side of the House, we stand for gender equity, we stand for an inclusive society, and we were very proud to announce Gender Equity Manitoba.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Health has so far refused to take responsibility for gender-affirming healthcare. I'll table the original version of the backgrounder that included these supports, along with the current version, where it's been scrubbed clean from the government's website. Earlier this week, the Health Minister refused to share the current wait times for gender-affirming surgeries and procedures. Either she doesn't know, or it's not her priority. Both are unacceptable. Will the Health Minister tell us the wait times today and explain why her government deleted their funding announcement for gender-affirming healthcare?
The Honourable Minister of Families.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I can appreciate that the member has their facts wrong. This is a program that has been established in the province since 2009, and I did already commit to them that I took the matter under advisement during Committee of Supply because I did not have the backlist that they were asking for, and I committed to getting that information. When I have that information available, I will be sure to update the House, including that member.
The Honourable Member for Union Station on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, it's clear that this government is in chaos. I mean, why else would they publish an announcement, not talk about it, and then delete it? Gender-affirming healthcare saves lives and should be a priority for this government, not buried at the bottom of a different announcement and then deleted altogether as if it never existed in the first place. Healthcare for 2S LGBTQ+ communities is the responsibility of the Minister for Health, yet she somehow, some way, continues to refuse to be the one to speak to it. Will the Minister of Health stand up in this House and say whether her ministry is responsible for the delivery of gender-affirming, life-saving health care in Manitoba?
The The Honourable Minister of Families.
So I can appreciate that the members opposite are very unhappy that it's our government that established a Gender Equity Manitoba with an enhanced mandate for it. What I cannot tolerate is that the member for St. John's sitting in her place calling me shameful as the first gender-affirming minister in this province to sit there and call me shameful, and she's shouting me down at this very moment. At this very moment, that member continues to shout me down. In addition, she voted against our investments. She voted against $250,000 for Pride and now shouts me down and calls me shameful. I ask that member to apologize and to stop calling me shameful.
Hear, hear.
Order. I'm going to ask everybody to show some more respect in this House, to be more civil to each other. And we are here in a wonderful democratic institution. We are supposed to be models for promoting democracy. And when we see this level of heckling that can occur, which sometimes goes beyond heckling to shouting, that really is crossing a line. So I'm going to ask for everybody's cooperation, please. Do better. The Honourable Member for Wolseley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Last night, the PCs held a party event attended by the Premier. The PC's election campaign chair, Candice Bergen, spoke at the event and showed us what the PCs say behind closed doors. According to her, so many young people are either disengaged, they're entitled. Many young people have been brainwashed in university or even as children at school. This is a shocking statement, Madam Speaker. It shows what the PCs really think of public education in our province. On this side of the House, we know Manitoba educators do not brainwash our kids. Will the Premier be clear? Who does she think is being brainwashed and by whom?
The Honourable Deputy Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And I'd say it was exciting to see 100 young people from across our province gather in the People's Building last night to talk about governance, to talk about politics. These are young people that are committed to their communities. They're clearly committed to our province, and we should be celebrating young people that are taking this initiative. And I want to thank them for coming and joining and have the conversation about politics. What is shocking is that the opposition would say this is a bad thing.
Yeah. The Honourable Member for Wolseley on a supplementary question.
Thank you to the Minister for confirming that a private party event was being held in this building last night. The PC's campaign co-chair, Candice Bergen, thinks that Manitoba's young people have been brainwashed as children at school. That is a despicable attack on young people, on their families, and on educators. And we know that similar rhetoric has been used to justify discrimination against the 2S LGBTQ+ community. These comments came just one day after the Brandon School Board rejected a book ban in our province. The Premier has shamefully refused to condemn banning books, but will she do the right thing and condemn her campaign chair's comments today?
The Honourable Minister for Environment and Climate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After over a quarter of a century in the media, I've seen dirty politics and mudslinging far too often. I myself have been a victim of mudslinging, false statements, and dirty politics by members of the NDP and by the leader of the Liberal Party and by their candidate in Kirkfield Park. And I think that they know, like everybody else in this city knows, we will not tolerate dirty politics. It is time to be grown-ups. It is time for politicians to stand on what they know and what they think. Mudslinging is nothing more than a form of insecurity and bullying, and it has to stop. And I would challenge.
Has expired. The member's time has expired. Order. The Honourable Member for Wolseley on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. There is a difference from what the PCs say in public and what they say at private to their members at these events, and the member for Kirkfield Park knows that because he was there. The PC campaign chair says that children are being brainwashed in our schools. That's what they think, a public education in Manitoba. This despicable rhetoric is not new. It's been used recently to attack 2S LGBTQ+ community and undermine our public education system. The Premier needs to be clear. She said nothing to meeting yesterday. She said nothing at the meeting yesterday, neither did that member, but Manitobans deserve answers. And educators deserve answers. Will the Premier unequivocally condemn Bergen's remarks today?
Order. The Honourable Minister for Sport, Culture and Heritage.
Madam Speaker, I might be relatively new here, but I'm not stupid and I wasn't born yesterday. When someone stands up in here day after day and puts false, misleading information on the record, that's bad. But what's worse is that they're creating a dangerous, harmful, hateful, violent, disrespectful, and misleading narrative in the public. I myself, the Premier, the Minister of Families and GEM, the Minister of Advanced Education, the Minister of Education, have all stood up and condemned violence and hatred towards all communities, including the 2S LGBTQ+. We've all said there's no book ban, and yet day after day, the members of opposition and the member from Wolseley put false, misleading information on the record, which they stand up immediately and apologize to all of Manitoba for what they are doing.
The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me reiterate, the PC's campaign co-chair, Candice Bergen, showed us what PCs really say behind closed doors. Last night at that event, they attended by the Premier and 6 ministers. Bergen said that young people are entitled, brainwashed at school. The PCs have repeatedly disrespected young people and educators, but this is really a new level. And it's concerning. What will this PC government do to public education if this is what they say behind closed doors? Yeah. The Premier needs to be clear. Does she agree with Candice Bergen that educators brainwash children in Manitoba?
Great.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to stand in the House today, and again, I will get to the member's question right away, but I would like to congratulate and welcome all the great students from École Edward Schreyer School in Beausejour under the leadership of teacher Elena Spence, a good friend of mine who we taught together for quite a few years. So welcome to the Manitoba Legislature. You're seeing what happens when one side puts false information on the record and the other side, Madam Speaker, puts the facts on the record, Madam Speaker. I'll answer the member's question in my next answer, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Transcona on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me reiterate again that her own campaign co-chair, Candice Bergen, said that young people are entitled, brainwashed, and at university and at school, that this is what's occurring. This demonstrates how the PCs operate, Madam Speaker. They say one thing to the public and something totally different behind closed doors. That's why they're worried about we are worried about their secret plan for funding public schools. They won't even release it. Yeah. They won't even talk about it. I don't even know if they know what they're going to be releasing later on after the election. So will the Premier explain, who does she think is being brainwashed and by whom?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Manitoba's K-12 education system is based on the philosophy of inclusion, which aims to make every individual feel accepted and safe in our K-12 education system, Madam Speaker. The member opposite, just the other day, and the rest of his colleagues in the NDP side, voted against $100 million, a 6.1% increase to the K-12 education system, which would continue to make sure that the success of all students in this great province of ours, no matter where they live, their cultural background, or their personal circumstance, they can achieve success in this great province of ours, Madam Speaker. The member should stand up and apologize to those students and all the students in Manitoba for voting down $100 million.
The Honourable Member for Transcona on a final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. The PCs have zero credibility, and they know it. And when it comes to public education, it even goes lower than that, Madam Speaker. Their campaign co-chair, Candice Bergen, said that young people are disengaged, entitled, and brainwashed in our very own school system. How despicable is that? And we're worried here on this side of the House that the PC plan for public education when they believe that teachers are brainwashers. Instead of standing up for young people, the Premier refuses to denounce these very comments that were said last night. The Premier needs to do the right thing right now, Madam Speaker, and unequivocally condemn Bergen's remarks. Will she do so today?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, it's actually unbelievable that the member from Transcona, an educator himself, would stand up and put these words on the record, Madam Speaker. He knows that he's speaking from the self-serving talking points of his leader, the member for Fort Rouge. It's shameful, Madam Speaker. On this side of the House, 23% increase to education funding since we took office in 2016, Madam Speaker. We are funding education at record, astronomical levels in the province, the largest percentage increase in over 40 years, Madam Speaker. We don't want to go back to the dark days of the NDP, Madam Speaker. We want to see success for all our students in Manitoba, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for St. John's.
As I've said many, many times, when people show you who they are, believe them. The Premier and several of her cabinet ministers attended
Order. Order. The Honourable Member for St. John's.
The Premier and several of her cabinet ministers attended a PC party last night where their election campaign co-chair, Candice Bergen, called young Manitobans disengaged, entitled, and claimed that they have been brainwashed in our schools and universities. This is simply outrageous. Candice Bergen is attacking Manitoba's next generation of leaders. She's attacking Manitoba families, and she's attacking our educators. Now, we know that the Premier can't bring herself to stand up and stand against banning books, but will she stand up and condemn these outrageous comments from her campaign co-chair today?
The Honourable Minister for Consumer Protection and Government Services.
Madam Speaker, the member for St. John's sometimes puts some horrible things on the record, and I would say she's even worse in her heckles. One heckle I think all of us could hear loud and clear just a few moments ago was when she shouted, "No one in the NDP will be apologizing." No one will be apologizing. That's her position. To be clear, she is saying that her leader won't ever be apologizing for making hurtful and hateful lyrics. He won't be apologizing. He won't be apologizing for making misogynistic and homophobic tweets. Will he? I'll give him an opportunity. I'll give him an opportunity today to stand up and begin to apologize.
Order. The honourable member for St. John's on a supplementary question.
This kind of rhetoric from the PC campaign co-chair is the same that we've heard from people trying to justify discrimination towards our LGBTQ community here in Manitoba. Candice Bergen said, and I quote, "So many people are either disengaged, they're entitled, many young people have been brainwashed in university, and even as children at school." End quote, Madam Speaker. How out of touch and outrageous is their campaign co-chair? This shows exactly what the PCs think about public education in our province. Will the Premier tell us if she agrees with Candice Bergen and her co-chair that educators are brainwashing our children?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Climate.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm sure everybody at home in Manitoba watching this knows quite clearly what election propaganda is. I spoke at that event to these young people. I was one of the speakers, and we thanked the young people. We wanted them to become engaged in the political process because we believe that they are our future. That in the past, politicians didn't want to listen to young people, and we have a Premier that is listening to young people, who wants them involved, wants them engaged, and wants them to be a part of the political process. That's what we're doing. We're not playing election propaganda and putting false information on the record day after day after day after day after day.
The honourable member for St. John's on a final supplementary.
There's a video, Madam Speaker. There's an audio of Candice Bergen uttering those words to youth. So I don't know what propaganda the star candidate, seems to think that we're putting on the record. But the thing is that the PCs say one thing to the public, and then behind closed doors they'll say an entirely offensive, outrageous thing. The PC campaign co-chair said educators in Manitoba are brainwashing children. We know this PC government has undermined our public school system, but these comments are a whole new level of disrespect for young Manitobans and our educators. The Premier needs to do the right thing and condemn these wild accusations.
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members opposite really want to spend their time focusing on campaign co-chairs and what may or may not have been said. I think that they should really spend some time looking at their own leader.
Order!
Their own leader is the only leader of an opposition party who has publicly supported any kind of a ban. When asked, would you have banned the song, "Baby It's Cold Outside?" he responded, yeah, I would have. It's not cool when you have a woman singing "What's in this drink?" and there's a guy pressuring her not to go home. So I don't think that's part of consent culture, and he would ban it. Madam Speaker, I'm going to table this article where he publicly supports bans on words.
The honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We were shocked but not surprised to learn that this PC government has decided to appoint somebody who flat out denies the documented history of residential schools to the board that will pick masters to serve in our justice system. As I table, former PC Attorney General Jim McRae has co-authored denials of the harm of residential schools with Tom Flanagan, Stephen Harper's former chief of staff, citing research from a conspiracy theorist and tagged as a hoax. For decades, at the residential school in McRae's hometown of Brandon, First Nations children from all over Manitoba were forced to work unpaid in fields, poorly dressed in cold weather, and so many children died that Principal Reverend Thompson Ferrier asked for a larger cemetery. None of this is in question. Courts are about facts and evidence. Why did the Premier appoint Jim McRae, who denies the facts and evidence of residential schools, to select people to serve in our courts?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Much, Madam Speaker. I've not had the opportunity to look at the information that the member has tabled, but certainly our government's record and our comments on residential schools have been clear and the harm, and we have a long and a strong history when it comes to reconciliation.
The Honourable Member for St. Boniface on a supplementary question.
Madam Speaker, these are the facts. That same principal at the Brandon Residential School, Thompson Ferrier, said that First Nations children had evil tendencies. He went further. Both church and state should have as a final goal the destruction and end of treaty and reservation life. Now, that statement was quoted verbatim and favorably in a book by CCF founder and NDP hero J.S. Woodsworth, who lived in Brandon and whose father, James Shaver Woodsworth, was in charge of every Methodist residential school across the West. A century later, we're still hearing the same denials from Jim McCrae of what was then called a national crime, which boils down to one thing: denying the mistreatment and dehumanization and deaths of Indigenous children. Why did the Premier appoint someone who is denying a national crime?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
About the harms of residential schools, we've taken significant efforts when it comes to reconciliation. We have strong relationships with Indigenous leaders right across the province of Manitoba. Madam Speaker, we'll continue along that path.
The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Madam Speaker, Amanda Sobey, who is here with us in the gallery today, and others, have a petition to the Premier signed by nearly 1,000 individuals to properly help those with lymphedema. They call for the province to recognize lymphedema in its entirety and to fund its treatment, including recognizing manual lymphatic drainage as a medical treatment, providing full coverage of medical-grade compression garments, as Saskatchewan does, ensuring all health professionals are well-trained in lymphedema, and moving to have lymphologists as a subspecialty separate from vascular specialists. Why has the Premier completely failed to act on any of these recommendations?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it gives me great pleasure today to stand up and answer the member from River Heights question. I'd like to welcome Ms. Sobey here for the chamber today and asking questions in regards to lymphedema. As the House knows, many, many years ago, I had the pleasure of bringing forward a private member's bill to acknowledge Lymphedema Awareness Day, which is March 6th of each and every year. And every year prior to that and since then, I've attended their conferences and their professional development sessions. We know on this side of the House that there was a lot of inaction on the 17 years of the NDP. But on our side of the House, we're actually having those conversations with the health minister. We're having conversations with the deans of nursing and physicians within the post-secondary institutions to try to bring to light
the member's time has expired. The Honourable Member for Swan River.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, there's one thing that everyone in this chamber can agree on. Manitoba is a beautiful province. The beauty of our province is best exemplified by our provincial parks. Could the Minister of Natural Resources and Northern Development provide more insight into the historic multi-year investments towards our gorgeous provincial parks? Yeah.
The Honourable Minister for Natural Resources and Northern Development.
Proud favorite. Thank you to my friend and colleague from Swan River for letting me speak about one of the treasures of Manitoba, our provincial parks. Last week, I was honored to announce the largest capital investment into our provincial parks in the history of Manitoba. We are injecting $220 million over 10 years into our parks, with $22 million being allocated this year alone. That means park users will see an increase in yurt capacity, new and improved campsites, upgrades to washroom and shower facilities, plus new and modernized campsites, docks, and boat launches. Our government has heard that Manitobans want more opportunities to experience parks, and this investment shows we are listening. I encourage everyone to get out to a park, see the stars, blaze the trails, and reconnect with this great province.
Yeah, yeah.
Well done. Uh-oh, another one.
The Honourable Member for Flin Flon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A wildfire caused the communities of Pimchikamak and Cross Lake to call for an evacuation of the community's 7,000 residents. Last night, residents were given 3 hours to pack their belongings and get to Thompson or the Paw, only to find there were not enough accommodations available. Many people, it's been reported, spent the night sleeping in their cars or on buses. While the evacuation order has since been rescinded, can the minister please tell us what's been learned from this evacuation, because clearly there was problems, so that communities are better prepared for any future evacuations?
The Honourable Minister for Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to let the member know that when it comes to our email staff, they've been always there dedicated, especially during floods, during forest fires, and especially this forest fire. They're out there working with Indigenous Services Canada, Red Cross, to making sure that evacuations are done properly, making sure that we take care of our First Nations, especially in northern communities like Cross Lake, and we make sure that we have accommodations for them, Madam Speaker. We work with the Minister of Families to making sure that accommodations are given out to First Nation communities. We are working together as departments, so as government. I'm telling you that NDP government didn't do in the past, Madam Speaker.
The time for oral questions has expired. Petitions. The Honourable Member for Elmwood.
Madam Speaker, I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background of this petition is as follows. Number one, over 25,000 vehicles per day cross the Louise Bridge, which has served as a vital link for vehicular traffic between Northeast Winnipeg and the downtown for the last 112 years. The current structure will undoubtedly be declared unsafe in a few years and has deteriorated extensively, is now functionally obsolete, and therefore none more subject to more frequent unplanned repairs and cannot be widened to accommodate future traffic capacity. Number three, as far back as 2008, the City of Winnipeg City has studied where the new replacement bridge should be situated. Number four, after including the bridge replacement in the city's 5-year capital budget forecast, in 2009, the new bridge became a short-term construction priority in the city's Transportation Master Plan of 2011. Number five, city capital and budget plans identified replacement of the Louise Bridge on a site just east of the bridge and expropriated homes there on the south side of Nairn Avenue in anticipation of a 2015 start.
Order.
Number six, in 2014, the new city administration did not make use of available federal infrastructure funds. Number seven, the new Louise Bridge Committee began its campaign to demand a new bridge, and its surveys confirmed residents wanted a new bridge beside the current bridge, with all the old bridge kept open for local traffic. Number eight, the NDP provincial government signaled its firm commitment to partner with the city on replacing the Louise Bridge in its 2015 throne speech. Unfortunately, provincial infrastructure initiatives such as the new Louise Bridge came to a halt with the election of the Progressive Conservative government in 2016. Two people are listening. Number nine, more recently, the city tethered the Louise Bridge replacement issue to its new Transportation Master Plan and Eastern Corridor project. Its recommendations have now identified the location of the new Louise Bridge to be placed just to the west of the current bridge, not to the east as originally proposed. Number 10. The city expropriation process has begun. The $6.35 million street upgrade of Nairn Avenue from Watt Street to the 112-year-old bridge is complete. Number 11. The new city administration has delayed the decision on the Louise Bridge for a minimum of 1 year and possibly up to 10 years unless the province steps in on behalf of Northeast Winnipeg residents and completes the overdue link. Number 12. The Premier has a duty to direct the provincial government to provide financial assistance to the city so it can complete the long overdue vital link to Northeast Winnipeg and Transcona. We petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. Number 1, to urge the Premier to financially assist the City of Winnipeg on building this 3-lane bridge in each direction to maintain this vital link between Northeast Winnipeg, Transcona, and the downtown. Number 2, to urge the provincial government to to recommend that the City of Winnipeg keep the old bridge fully open to traffic while the old bridge is under construction. And number 3, to urge the provincial government to consider the feasibility of keeping the old bridge open for active transportation in the future. And this petition is signed by many, many Manitobans.
In accordance with our Rule 133, Bracket 6, when petitions are read, they are deemed to be received by the House. And just could I have everybody's attention, please? And I particularly would like to draw the attention to the Honourable Member for Portage Prairie and our guests. Guests are not to be, I guess, working the room and saying hello to everybody. They're welcome to come and sit in the loge, but once the proceedings are finished, we do ask our guests to have their conversations in the hallway. So we would appreciate the members' cooperation. Thank you. The next petition is the Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. The background to this petition is as follows. Number 1. According to Census 2021, Punjabi is the 4th most spoken language in Canada, and there are 33,315 people in Manitoba whose native language is Punjabi. Number 2, thousands of Punjabi newcomers are coming to Manitoba as students and as immigrants looking to call this province home. People of Punjabi origin contribute a great deal to the social and economic development of Canada and Manitoba in fields such as education, science, health, business, and politics. Number 3, in coming to Manitoba, Punjabi newcomers make sacrifices including distance from their cultural roots and language. Many Punjabi parents and families want their children to retain their language and keep a continued cultural appreciation. Number 4, Manitoba has many good bilingual programs and public schools for children and teens available in other languages, including French, Ukrainian, Ojibwe, Cree, Hebrew, and Spanish. Punjabi bilingual programs for children and teens, as well as Punjabi language instruction at a college and university level, could similarly teach and maintain Punjabi language and culture. Number 5, Punjabi bilingual instruction would help cross-cultural friendships, relationships, and marriages and prepare young people to be multilingual professionals. We therefore petition the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows. To urge the provincial government to take steps to implement Punjabi bilingual programs in public schools similar to existing bilingual programs and take steps to implement Punjabi language instruction in other levels of education right here in Manitoba. And this petition, Deputy Speaker, is signed by many Manitobans.
The Honourable Member for Notre Dame.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I wish to present the following petition to the Legislative Assembly. To the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba, these are the reasons for this petition. Number 1, in 2022, after consultation with industry members, the provincial government mandated the first construction industry minimum wage increase since 2017. Number 2, construction industry minimum wages for the majority of the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector will increase by 14% from 2022 to 2024. Number 3, these wage increases were necessary to catch up with inflation from the lack of increases since 2017 and to maintain pace with inflation for the next 3 years. Number 4, however, heat and frost insulators will only receive an 8.91% increase from 2022 to 2024, despite insulators experiencing the same cost of living increases as other trades. Number 5, this lower wage increase will make it more difficult to attract and retain skilled professionals to the heat and frost insulator trade, which will be to the detriment of the construction industry as a whole. Number 6, the 8.91% wage increases will mean that over 300 heat and frost insulators working in Manitoba will lose roughly $3,578 per year when compared to a 14% increase. Number 7, this lower wage increase is unfair and harms heat and frost insulators and the trade as a whole. We petitioned the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba as follows: to urge the provincial government to modify the construction industry minimum wage schedule to implement a 14% increase to the heat and frost insulator trade to reflect a wage of $34.23 in 2024. This has been signed by Marissa Baquet, Ben Strath, Jason Manning, and many other Manitobans.
Are there any other petitions? In accordance with our Rule 133, subsection 6, when petitions are... Okay. Well, they are deemed to be received by the House. So, grievances, orders of the day, government business. Okay, order please. As indicated by the filing of notice yesterday, we will now proceed with the consideration of an Opposition Day motion sponsored by the Honourable Member for Transcona. For the information of the House, as today is also the deadline day for report stage amendments on specified bills, at 4 o'clock we will be interrupting proceedings to consider those RSAs. If the Opposition Day motion is not concluded by that time, we will set it aside and return to it after the RSAs have been dealt with. The Honourable Member for Transcona to move his motion. The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move, seconded by the Member for Concordia, that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for trying to hide its new education funding model that would severely impact the funding by millions of dollars for school divisions like Pembina Trails, Seven Oaks, Louis-Riel, Red River Valley, Lord Selkirk, and many, many more.
Just need to ask the member for Transcona who the seconder was. It's Concordia. Thank you. Okay, it has been moved by the Honourable Member for Transcona, seconded by the Honourable Member for Concordia, that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for trying to hide its new education funding model that would severely impact the funding by millions of dollars for school divisions like Pembina Trails, Seven Oaks, Louis-Riel, Lord Selkirk, and much more. The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Well, thank you, Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to be up here and debate on this serious Opposition Day motion this afternoon. These are one of the many mechanisms we have here in the Manitoba Legislature to get serious issues brought to the floor of this chamber and to have robust debate and robust conversation about what is important to Manitobans. After healthcare, education is the second most important piece that Manitobans talk about on a very regular basis. It's a part that really defines us as a province. And like I said earlier, I'm very happy to be up here to talk about the responsibility that governments have to ensure stable, predictable funding for public education. I will say this, that for the 7 years, it has certainly been very predictable, predictably low. and predictably underfunded consistently. And right now we're beginning to see and feel the impacts of how this is cumulatively now severely impacting public education in Manitoba. This government likes to say that it's funded it properly throughout the past 7 years, but clearly what has happened to the system indicates that it has not been doing that. School divisions have been struggling. We knew when this government was first elected in 2016 that it was going to have a severe impact on one of these really important stewardship pieces that government has, and that is stewardship over the public education system. We call it stewardship, Deputy Speaker, because stewardship implies partnership. Partnership with local communities, partnership with families, and partnerships with Manitobans writ large. It's a very important piece that we can't diminish. That partnership is important. So what did they do right away? They came in with Bill 64 that wanted to destroy that partnership completely. And actually, Deputy Speaker, a model that is very much taken from that shared health model. Can you imagine a shared health model that would have been forced upon a public school system without any accountability, without any local voice or local choice in any of these matters? And we see the disaster that is our public health care system would have been imparted on our public education system. Just imagine what that would look like right now.
Yeah.
And I think we can, because we see a clear example in our healthcare system. These last few years, Deputy Speaker, have borne witness to funding that is neither predictable or stable. School divisions right now, because of Bill 71, which was introduced after Bill 64, Bill 71 is absolutely tied to hands of local school boards in making decisions that can positively impact their families, their kids, and their communities. What has Bill 71 done? Well, it's tied the hands of school boards. Actually, all school boards do now, Deputy Speaker, is that they decide where they're going to cut next.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that? Because they do not have stable, predictable funding in place for the public education system. That is something as stewards, as provincial government, as MLAs here in this House, we have to take very seriously and ensure that we are a predictable partner that school divisions can rely on. A predictable funding partner and a predictable partner that shows leadership in particular areas that really impact Manitobans. So let's talk about some of those leadership pieces and what this funding model, this proposed funding model that we uncovered a week ago shows where the priorities are. This particular funding model that we exposed shows that the cuts will continue, Deputy Speaker. If there's anything predictable, like I said earlier in my previous comments, is that the funding will not be sustainable for school divisions to operate in the way that they need to, especially when we're coming out of a pandemic. Here's the other piece that I found interesting. And I will say this, that during the pandemic, we had the Remote Learning Center, a very successful piece that was put in place, I will say, by this government in response to the needs of students and families, especially those that are immunocompromised, those kids that have a difficult time in a regular classroom setting. But as soon as we come out of into the shadow of the pandemic, they cut the Remote Learning Center despite the demand and the need for those kind of services, Deputy Speaker. So when we talk about a funding model that needed to reflect what students and families really needed, here was something that was actually being used and also communicated to the government that is something very necessary to continue on. I think this would have been an opportunity to show that through some of these lessons that were learned throughout the pandemic, we can apply to certain pieces and certain supports and resources that kids really needed. And I know families really appreciated, Deputy Speaker, having the services of the Remote Learning Center, because it also took into account kids that have a difficult time being in a regular school setting. So here was a support that was doing what it was intended to do, work in partnership and in stewardship with school divisions that don't have the resources, Deputy Speaker, right now to provide remote learning or provide learning that doesn't happen in a traditional classroom. What this funding model shows, Deputy Speaker, is that that wasn't thought of at all. And that a support that was put in place that was actually quite delivered on its main mission, but was cut without any real consultation, without consulting those that were impacted the most. And that's what this funding model will continue to do, Deputy Speaker. It will continue down this road of cuts and unpredictable funding that has absolutely stymied local school divisions. I've said before, Bill 64 is certainly very supported by Bill 71 and now by this funding model that was released and made public last week. It's unfortunate, Deputy Speaker, that we have to do these things, these pieces, when really the Department of Ed and the Minister should be out there consulting and saying, this is who we're meeting with. Yeah. And through meeting, we're coming up with a formula that's going to meet the needs of kids, because we know coming out of the pandemic, those needs have greatly shifted and greatly changed. I've said earlier, a perfect example of that was the Remote Learning Center. That is something that was created that was actually fulfilling its purpose and came to morph into something that was even better and more necessary for kids that really appreciated that support. And I know families have reached out to the Department of Ed regarding the Remote Learning Center. They've certainly reached out to me. I know they've reached out to the Minister too. And I hope that type of communication, that type of real public consultation is going to be taken by the department, and there will be an announcement that will take care of that particular need, Deputy Speaker. But back to the funding model and back to how it's connected to Bill 71. We know that part of Bill 71 is something called the Property Tax Offset Grant. Nowhere in this new funding model does it indicate that that grant's going to be there or even be sustainable in what it's supposed to do.
That's right.
Because right now what's happened is that we've had 2 school divisions, Deputy Speaker, based on this funding model and based on the PTOG that have completely decided they're not going to take the property tax offset grant because they want to invest in kids, their families, and their communities. They're going to forego it because they know that they can go to the people that are in their area, and they know that they're going to want to invest in their children and community, Deputy Speaker. What this particular funding model shows, and their unwillingness really to talk about how they're going to fund public education, it shows really what is going to be happening as we move forward. In this election year, Manitobans will have a decision to make, but it'd be great if we can make an informed decision. If Manitobans had in front of them, Deputy Speaker, the proposed funding model so that we can say, yes, does this meet our needs? Maybe, maybe not. Here's how we can improve that. Here's how we can add our voice to something that is really consequential, that I've said many, many times, and I know many MLAs in this House believe, that a robust, fully funded public education system is something that draws people to Manitoba. So when we talk about having people come here to live, work, and to raise their families, it's really important that we have a fully funded, fully resourced public school system that everybody can be proud of, that we can all say, as 57 MLAs, we had a role in ensuring was properly funded. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Great.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it gives me, again, it's an honor to stand up and put some factual information on the record, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's unfortunate, though, that I have to stand up and put factual information on the record when my friend from Transcona, the critic for education, who should be standing in the House and advocating for student success in this great province of ours, Mr. Deputy Speaker. For him to stand up and put forward an Opposition Day motion with so many inaccuracies, it's actually laughable. Matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the information that was tabled not that long ago by the official opposition, I mean, this was a funding model review, a slide deck of proposed funding under an old and a new model, and that was brought forward to our government, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Matter of fact, it was brought forward by the funding model review team, which that model was rejected, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The member from Transcona speaks about going out and having conversations with education stakeholders. Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's exactly what we're doing. Actually, our education partners across this great province of ours, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are constantly, on a day-to-day basis, being appreciative to myself, the department, and our government for having the collaborative approach that we do have. They're saying they don't want to go back to the dark days of the NDP government where everything was decided behind closed doors, the shadows of darkness, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They made decisions in the NDP caucus when they were in government that absolutely had no regard for any student success. They underfunded education. They made sure, matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, here comes a little bit of a history lesson. When the NDP took over power in 1999 and early 2000s, our students in Manitoba, they were testing in numeracy and literacy. We were finishing third in this great country of ours, in Canada. As the NDP continued along their modes of I don't even know what they were doing, the multiple different education ministers, that the failed education ministers under the NDP government, Mr. Deputy Speaker. You know where our students ended up in 2014 and 2015? Last. Last in numeracy, last in literacy, last in science, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is the record of the dark days of the NDP. So what did we do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when we came into power? First of all, we needed to make sure that we were funding education. Secondly, we needed to make sure that we were actually going to go and do some more collaboration and consulting with Manitobans about education. So we did a K-12 commission, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We had a committee. We had them go around and speak to Manitobans, 30,000 plus Manitobans, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Something that the NDP could have done, they didn't do, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They were happy with the fact that under their misguided, failed education ministers, they saw that our students had dropped from third in the country to dead last and further behind ninth, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That is not good enough for our great students in Manitoba, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So we are taking a different approach. We're actually consulting with Manitobans. What do they see? What do they need in the K-12 education system? 30,000 Manitobans came out, gave us advice, K-12 commission. First commission on education in this great province of ours since 1959, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Shame on the NDP's former government, the dark days of the NDP, who didn't even think about actually going outside these walls and actually having consultations with the experts, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But we on this side of the House, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're priding ourselves on actually going and having those conversations. The slide deck that the member had tabled a couple weeks ago was rejected by our government. So that's why we are going out and we are having those conversations with each and every school division in this great province of ours, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to make sure that we get the funding model right. You know what? You want to know why? Because school divisions have been calling for this for 20 plus years, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Not one of those members on the NDP side ever stood up. And even the new members, where were they? They were going to these leadership contests and they weren't saying a word. Matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they would stand up and they'd applaud for Greg Salinger. the individual who appointed those failed education ministers and saw that our education system had taken a turn for the worst, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Well, the member from Transcona wants to talk about funding. Well, I know that the member from Transcona talks about $100 million, a 6.1% increase, as crumbs. As crumbs, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's unfortunate that the member from St. Vital wants to talk or whatever else or heckle from his seat, but he'll get the opportunity to speak, and I know that he's probably up and speaking, so it's all good, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So $100 million, 6.1% increase this year alone. That doesn't even take into the account hundreds of millions of dollars that are going towards capital, building new schools. We're building new schools where the NDP failed. They didn't bother building. Matter of fact, they had no foresight. They were only interested in their own partisan rhetoric, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So going to the member's opposition day motion here, so I do want to share with the House that since our Premier from the MLA from Tuxedo has taken over, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let's talk about funding in the last 3 years alone. Not counting since we formed government, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we have increased education funding by the tune of 23%. I hope that the member from St. Vital stands up and applauds for that 23%, because I know that the member from St. Vital does not agree with his member from Transcona about that $100 million is crumbs. He knows that that $100 million is going to fund and to help create successes for not only the school divisions, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but also for all of our students. So, in the opposition day motion, the member from Transcona mentioned St. James Assiniboia. So the last 3 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker, St. James Assiniboia received in the school year of 21-22 12.7%. That's over a $4.5 million increase. The following year, 22-23, 7.9%. That's over $3 million increase. This year, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 8.1% increase. These are not crumbs, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We on this side of the House have faith in the electoral process, the democratic process here in Manitoba. We know that those school divisions are taking those funds and making sure that they are using those funds to address the priorities within their school division and in their school communities. It's unfortunate that the member from Transcona does not have faith in those elected officials. Matter of fact, the member from Transcona sounds a lot like a couple of those failed education ministers under the former NDP government, where they thought that they should micromanage everything, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The second school division I want to mention is the Pembina Trail School Division, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In the school year of 21-22, they got a 13.1% increase, almost $8 million, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The following year, just over $8 million to the tune of 12.2%. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, this year alone, within that astronomical funding that we've given again this year, Mr. Deputy Speaker, over $10 million, 13.2% increase, Mr. Deputy Speaker. These again are not crumbs. We want to make sure that the schools are well funded, the school divisions are well funded, and we want to make sure that students all across this great province of ours, Mr. Deputy Speaker, are experiencing success. No matter what their cultural background is, where they live, or their own personal circumstance. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I look forward to hearing more false information get put on the record by the members of the NDP.
The member's time has expired. Before recognizing the member for Point Douglas, I unfortunately have to acknowledge a clerical error that requires the member for Transcona to reread a slightly adapted version. I'm sorry, the correct version of the motion that he previously read. So I recognize the member for Transcona to read the correct version into the record.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I move, seconded by the member for Concordia, that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for trying to hide its new education funding model that would severely and negatively impact the funding by millions of dollars for school divisions like Pembina Trails, Winnipeg, St. James Assiniboia, Seven Oaks, Louis-Riel, Lord Selkirk, Interlake, and much more. Thank you.
Yeah. It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Transcona, seconded by the Honourable Member for Concordia, that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for trying to hide its new education funding model that would severely and negatively impact the funding by severely and negatively impact the funding by millions of dollars for school divisions like Pembina Trails, Winnipeg, St. James Assiniboia, Seven Oaks, Louis-Riel, Lord Selkirk, Interlake, and much more. Okay. Now recognize the Honourable Member for Point Douglas.
Miigwech, Deputy Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague for bringing this forward and bringing this attention to what this government wants to hide. And what they've been told is an election-losing budget, and have been told to hold off on this until possibly maybe slim little chances that they'd get reelected. But we know that Manitobans aren't fooled by this government. We know that they are in tune to what they're doing to our education system by what they've done to our healthcare system. Our students in this province deserve the best quality education possible. And they have a minister who is an educator that should know what good quality education is. That small class sizes, this government went from 20, teachers are telling me that they have well over 28 students in the classroom. And that education minister knows what happens when you have too many kids in a classroom and one teacher. Kids fall behind. They don't get the proper attention that they need. Many times, kids don't even get the extra supports because of what this government has done to our education system. Seven Oaks School Division, and I know the members opposite don't like to hear about the cuts that have been that have had to happen under their government that have resulted in less services to kids. Classes are struggling with less EA time. Kids with exceptional needs are struggling because one EA has to help the whole classroom when often a student may need full-time EA support. And teachers are being run off their feet. They've come back from COVID this first year, and they're barely making it to the end this year. They've had struggle after struggle because this government hasn't come to the table and kept up with the resource support that they had within the pandemic. And the member from Transcona talked about it. You know, the learning lapse that happened. The pandemic provided extra support, but this government has pulled all of that support. They've cut supports even further. And now we know what it's going to look like if they were to be reelected, which we know is not going to happen because Manitobans aren't happy with what they're doing. They continue to cut. And you know, the member from Lac du Bonny talked about, you know, some of the services and the successes. Well, I can tell you, Deputy Speaker, the swim program is needed for students. We have so many newcomers that are coming to Winnipeg here, to Manitoba, that don't know how to swim. We've seen drownings in our great province here. This valuable resource in our school divisions helps students learn how to swim so that if they go to one of our beaches here in our province, that they have the skills to be able to survive if they become, you know, in a situation where they find themselves in need of those valuable skills. The skate program, learn to skate. So many kids don't have opportunities to learn how to skate. And due to these cuts, like look, 11 million from Seven Oaks School Division. That's a lot of money. That's making divisions make hard choices. And what the education minister said, well, school divisions need to prioritize. Well, school divisions have prioritized. They've prioritized busing for students to get to and from school. Many kids live far, far away and don't have, someone with a vehicle to get them to school. So that means higher truancy levels because kids can't get to school. That's what this government is promoting, kids not getting to school. And I think about, the member from Radisson and speaking about nutrition programs and saying, oh, we shouldn't be feeding kids in school. Absolutely, we should be feeding kids in school. As a teacher myself, I bought a fridge. I had it in my classroom. Kids would come in and they, often didn't have breakfast at school. Maybe they got up late, and I hear the member from Radisson chirping over there, and I'm sorry that we have differing opinions here, that, on this side of the house, we think that kids should get nutritious meals in school, and that schools should be investing in that. While this side of the house, or that side of the house, doesn't think that, offering those at schools, especially lunch programs as well. I was one of those kids that went to school extra early because I came from a low-income family, one-parent family with 3 kids. Often didn't have, breakfast or even a sandwich to take to school. What did that mean for me? If that lunch program wasn't there, I wouldn't go to school because I didn't have a lunch because I was embarrassed to sit there with my other, students without a lunch. But this, providing food in schools, allows every kid to feel equal in a school where, maybe it's not a low-income area. Maybe you're in the South End and you're living in social housing over there and you're struggling, or you're a low-income parent that's struggling with one job and has their kids in daycare and doesn't have enough money to, have breakfast. Schools are prioritizing, and that's what this government needs to understand, is they are doing the best they can with what limited resources that this government has given them, and they've continued to cut, which has resulted in schools having to make tough decisions, which has resulted in less teachers in the classroom, has resulted in less EAs in the classroom, has resulted in now social workers not being in schools. Social workers play a valuable role. I can tell you that, Deputy Speaker. Working with, social workers in school divisions, make sure that students have the supports that they need. And I think about, I was just at a school in the librarian, I was presenting in the library to the students on Red Dress Day. And the librarian came over to me. She said, I've been working in the education system for 45 years. And my position has been cut to half-time as a result of this PC government. Imagine that. Someone who loves their job, and they do such a tremendous job, reading to our kids, making sure that they have access to the resources that they need, and then, you have a government that wants to limit what kids have in their schools. We haven't had a premier stand up and, speak against it. But we need well-funded schools. And I want to go back to all of the cuts. So $10 million from Louis-Riel School Division. $10 million. And I think about the overages in Project Nova, $200 million. And that education minister was saying, oh, $100 million. Well, look at what, MPI, $200 million over budget. Imagine what that could do for the education system. You look at St. James of Assiniboia, $8.5 million. Imagine how many teachers are going to have to be cut from that school division. $4.5 million from Pembina Trails School Division. Over $2 million from Winnipeg School Division. Many of the schools I represent are in the inner city in Winnipeg School Division, and I know they need more resources. I know that there's students that are struggling to get to school. I know that myself, as a student growing up in the North End, I had a truant officer often come to my house to get me to school. And those are valuable services. Social workers, they often do that as well. Go and work with the family and figure out, how can we get the student to school? what is it that they're lacking to get them to school, and how can we as a community ensure that our kids are getting to school and being educated? I think about, some of the programs that have been cut in their last year for kids that are going to post-secondary. Some of our trades, school divisions are now thinking about scaling back how many kids are going to be able to go through these programs. There's a real big need in our province for trades, and we should be infusing more money into our school divisions to ensure that those students that come out of the school divisions are being employed right here in our province. We have too many companies that are coming from other provinces when we should be, growing our own here in Manitoba and making sure that our schools have the resources to do that. So when you see $1.5 million being cut, like from Flin Flon School Division, $2 million from Borderland School Division, $8 million from Lord Selkirk School Division, $4 million from Pembina Trails School Division, and then $2 million from Southwest Horizon School Division, and nearly $8 million from Sunrise School Divisions. This results in fewer EAs, fewer teachers, fewer services. Kids aren't getting to school on buses, and certainly we need to be supporting, and this government has a responsibility to do that.
Honourable member for St. Patel.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I'm happy to put some words on the record with respect to this very poignant and very topical and very critical Opposition Day motion brought forward by my colleague, the member for Transcona, to discuss education, discussing the funding around education and the proposed funding brought over by this PC government. I was listening to the member's comments, which I think were very insightful, about the future of education, the importance of it, and his experience as being an educator for a number of years. I heard the minister's comments as well in regards to his attacks on us and attacks on former past education ministers. And I think that it's very enlightening to see the difference, that a member on our side, a member for Transcona, is looking to the future, to see how we can invest to make our system better. Meanwhile, we have a Minister of Education that seems to be so caught up, twisted himself into knots, sick and tired of the past, things that happened in the past, that he seems unable to focus on actually doing the job of educating our kids who are in the school system today, making sure they're set up for the future of our province. And so I would urge the Minister to reflect on those comments and the difference between the two comments, and ensure that his mindset, his department's mindset are on the right priorities, on the priorities of educating the young people in Manitoba. Now, when I think about specifically around their funding for education, and I look at the approach that this current PC government has been taking, I can't help but wonder where they start off when they come up, when they say, hey, today's going to be our discussion about how we fund education in Manitoba. Where is their starting point? Well, it seems to be that their starting point starts with the out-of-province billionaires. It seems like they start with them. They start with the out-of-province billionaires and say, well, how much money do we need to send out of province? Okay, let's figure out how much money we need to send to the head of Loblaws and Superstore, and how much we need to send out to the head of Walmart, the billion-dollar companies that are not based in Manitoba. Let's figure out how much we can send to them. Let's take that money right out of the classroom for kids. Let's take that money out of our education system and send it out of province. Once they've filled up that bucket for out of the out-of-province billionaires, it seems like their next priority seems to be the wealthiest Manitobans, the wealthiest corporations. And then they figure out, okay, well, how much money can we take out of our education system to put into the wealthiest, largest corporations, like the owners of Polo Park and some of the largest real estate owners in Manitoba. And then they say, after they figure out how much money they're taking out of our education system to send off to the wealthiest here, they then look at saying, okay, well, this seems to be how much money is left. And whatever's left at the end of the day is what they put into education. I think that's why we're seeing a funding model that has been presented here, that that outlines cuts across the board. $11 million cut for the Seven Oaks School Division. $10 million cut from L'Oreal School Division. $8.5 million cut from St. James Assiniboine School Division. $4.5 million cut from Pembina Trail School Division. Over $2 million cut from the Winnipeg School Division. Over $2 million cut from Borderland School Division. Over $1.5 million cut from Flin Flon School Division. Nearly $3 million from the Interlake School Division. Nearly $8 million from Lord Selkirk School Division. Over $4 million from Pembina Trail School Division. Over $2 million from Southwest Horizon School Division. Now, this is what happens when you start off the process of education funding by looking at how do we get money into billionaires' hands first. And then at the end of the day, you end up with cuts in the classroom. Now, how does that actually impact students? How does that actually impact the welfare of the minds of young people who are trying to educate and set up for success into the future? Well, let me tell you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I've spoken with educators. I've spoken with assistant superintendents. I've spoken with EAs, talked to students themselves, and they all feel the cuts in their classroom. They feel it every single day. They know they feel it when they have to take a day off, or whether it's sick or for one reason or the other, and there's not enough funding from their division to pay for a substitute. They feel it when in a classroom they used to have an EA or two EAs to support them in the classroom. Teachers feel it when now they don't have any EAs in their classroom. They feel it when there are newcomers into their school who speak another language. There used to be someone in their classroom to support them. There used to be someone to help them adjust to learning in either English or in French. And now, because of the funding cuts in our education system, there's no one there. And it makes it more challenging for those students to learn, putting them behind the rest of the class. Now, that's the real impacts of some of these funding cuts, some of these funding choices that this PC government has made. Now, the minister in his comments made a remark that they had a funding model review team who did some work. Obviously, this must have taken several weeks or months, perhaps even longer, to put forward a model of what the funding would look like. And he admits that what we presented, what was tabled by the member from Transcona, and the cuts that I listed out just moments ago, that was part of a slide deck that was prepared by the funding model review team. And so obviously, this was a funding model review team that was set up by this PC government, by perhaps this minister himself. Was this review team handpicked by the minister to set out and do the work of creating a new funding model? Well, if it was, and this is what they came with, then really the minister is the one who's asking for these sort of cuts. So for him to shy away from or claim that it's been rejected seems like such a false narrative. And I suggest, and I'd love to hear confirmation or a rejection of this notion by the other side, as to whether this is the funding model that's going to be brought back in the event that they have another term in office. I mean, is this funding model review team still at work? The minister says that they're still listening to Manitobans. So is this same team, the same team who brought forward a $10 million cut to the L'Oreal School Division, are they still the ones who are at work trying to make a new funding model? That, of course, conveniently won't be released until after the election. But is this same team at work making another funding model review? And I don't think it gives us any confidence. I don't think it gives Manitobans any confidence that that any funding model that the PC government brings forward would be any different than this, because they have a track record, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They have a track record of underfunding education in this province, and it's only serving themselves. It's to the detriment of the kids. It's the detriment of students, it's the detriment of educators, administrators, and all those who care about education in our province. And so it's quite perplexing to hear the minister try to run away from this review when it was himself who set it up, who asked for the funding to be reviewed for this new model to get created in the first place. And I wonder, I think the big question that a lot of us are asking, a lot of Manitobans, a lot of parents are asking themselves is, if it wasn't an election year, if they weren't so concerned about their own jobs, would they just have moved forward with this funding model? Or is it only because that we're in an election year that they chose to temporarily back away from this funding model and are fully willing to implement this after the election? I think it's a huge concern. It's a massive concern that teachers, parents, students have about what the future of education might look like if this government, this PC government, has an opportunity to inflict this type of damage in our education system. So it's a huge concern. On this side of the House, we want to take a vastly different approach to education, one that involves listening and working with students, teachers, administrators to find out their core concerns, how we can best address them, and how we can fund them in a way that represents a way for them to find solutions for their issues and educate kids in our education system so that they can reach their highest potential. We will be able to do this after the next election. I know Manitobans will be looking at the education system as a key choice in their election decision-making in the fall, and we know we can present the best possibilities for Manitobans.
The member's time has expired. The Honourable Government House Leader on House Business.
Could you please canvass the House for leave to allow the sponsors of report stage amendments to be considered this afternoon to make a speech up to 1 minute long using the timer clock on each of their own amendments, despite the fact that our rules do not allow for speeches on these amendments. For clarity, only the sponsors will be allowed to speak to their amendments. No other members will be allowed to speak on any of the amendments.
Okay, is there leave to allow the sponsors of the report stage amendments to be considered this afternoon to make a speech up to 1 minute long using the timer clock on each of their own amendments, despite the fact our rules do not allow for speeches on these amendments? For clarity, only the sponsors will be allowed to speak to their amendments. No other member will be allowed to speak on any of the amendments. Is there leave? Leave has been granted. I now recognize the honourable member for St. Boniface.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I won't spend too much time talking about this. I do want to mention it's unfortunate that that this is what's taking up this afternoon's time in the legislature. Underfunding of education is incredibly important. We agree that education is being underfunded. We recognize that there are lots of school divisions that are laying people off, facing cuts, running deficits, because there's a huge variety in the amount that funding has been increased. When inflation is high, the amount of federal funding to this government is up by over $1 billion this year, over 16.8%. In some places are only getting 2% increases. And again, it's unfortunate because there is actually a lot of important legislation that we're going to be talking about at some point later this afternoon, and we're going to have no opportunity to debate that at all. Because we're talking about this, and there are lots of important and serious fact-based debates we could be having. The problem with this is that the idea that this is a hidden plan, and believe me, I am not defending the government, but this is not a hidden plan, because if you look right at the top of it, it says, 22, the year that it applies is 2022, 2023. That's the fiscal year. That fiscal year has already passed. It's over. This is not a plan for something that's going to happen in the future. This is a plan for something that was considered and maybe what happened in the past and never happened. So this is a make-believe debate in a province that has lots of very real problems. So it's unfortunate that we're talking about this because there are real other plans. We could talk about there was a health report that was concealed, which showed that the government could have done something a year ago for all sorts of issues in healthcare and didn't do that. This is not it. It says 2022, 2023, That fiscal year ended on March 31st, 2 months ago. It is subject to change based on factors outlined on slide 21. We do not seem to have a copy of slide 21. So, and when we look at the government's numbers, they don't actually match up with this. So with that, I'll just say it's unfortunate. We could be talking about really substantive issues, having debates about the bills that are coming forward, and about the report, very important report stage amendments that are going to be coming up with a number of these bills. It's unfortunate that the official opposition has chosen to waste the House's time with this motion today. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Flin Flon.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I realize that the member from St. Boniface thinks talking about school funding is a waste of time. On this particular party, we don't believe that talking about school funding is a waste of time. We think it's a very important topic that should be discussed, and we think that when the government tries to hide what their plans are when it comes to school funding is something that should be fleshed out and discussed once it sees the light of day, which this plan did, I'm sure much to the government's chagrin, which is why it didn't get implemented, because they realized at some point in time they figured out, or somebody told them, they may not have figured it out, that this was another Bill 64 in the making, which would have guaranteed their downfall in the next election. I mean, it's kind of guaranteed anyway, but this would have been the final nail in the coffin to sink their ship, to realize that so many school divisions that are already struggling because of this government's funding and shortage of funding, freezing funding, not even recognizing that there's something called inflation that affects funding. So many school divisions already suffering. The fact that this government came up with this report that suggests that there would be further cuts to that funding. And the member from St. Boniface pointed out that, yeah, the date on that has come and gone. But here's what Manitobans need to ask themselves. And it's a very serious question. Do they trust this government not to bring this same funding level back, or possibly something worse, if, heaven forbid, they should win the next election? And I think most Manitobans are smart enough, well, in fact, I believe pretty much all Manitobans are smart enough to not trust this government based on their track record. Based on their track record of underfunding, cutting, pretending that everything's lovely, talking about astronomical funding levels, which aren't astronomical, making big announcements, which this government loves to do, but then not living up to those announcements, not actually funding things the way they're supposed to be. No, I've listened to several members talk about what's happening with the funding in their particular school divisions and in some of the Winnipeg and Southern school divisions. But we also know that in there was a $1.5 million cut to the Flin Flon school division. So what does that potentially mean for them? Well, we already know that northern school divisions struggle to attract teachers because it costs more to live in the north. And quite frankly, a lot of teachers don't want to go to the north because some of them see it as a career-limiting move, because if they get stuck too long in some of these northern divisions, in their minds it's seen as holding them back for future advancement. So what do school divisions like Flin Flon need? Well, they need sufficient funding to make sure that things like the negotiated collective agreements that this government tried to do away with Bill 64, you need to make sure that some of those additional bonuses for northern teachers are maintained, and in fact, not just maintained, but increased. We know that whether you're a teacher or the janitor at the school, all of your costs in the north have gone up exponentially compared to costs down south. A teacher in Winnipeg may only have to drive a block or two to get to school. Whereas many of these teachers, I look at places like Sheridan, for example. Now, Sheridan is part of the Frontier School Division that did, according to this secret document, was in line to receive an increase. But would it have been an increase sufficient to pay teachers in Sheridan a proper salary remuneration to account for the fact that if they need a loaf of bread, they have to drive 2.5 hours to get it? Because there is no stores in Sheridan anymore. So teachers have to try and plan ahead, as do other folks that live there that this government also chooses to ignore. We know from talking to the Flin Flon School Division previously that they were already so short of funding that they were trying to change schools around so that they could combine some of the services for classes, if you will. People that moved to specific neighborhoods so that they could be close to the school where their children went were all of a sudden being told, because of this government's funding cuts, that their kids wouldn't be going to that school anymore. They'd be going to a school across town where there was no hope of them actually procuring services for after-school care or lunch care or any of those things. So I don't know which minister wants to stand up and say how cutting funding to that division is going to help that division meet the needs of parents, of kids in that division. And I know one of the members opposite doesn't believe that kids should get fed at school just because he's well off enough that he can afford to make sure his kids get school lunch, get breakfast in the morning. But in the north, in a lot of communities, not just the north, there are many families that struggle to meet the basic needs because their income level hasn't kept up with inflation. So a school lunch program is an essential thing so that kids can learn and get ahead. Now, I realize that this government really doesn't care if northern kids get ahead, otherwise they'd have done something about internet and they'd have done something about cell service for all those northern communities that they've managed to fumble that so badly that nothing has changed under their watch. Cranberry Portage, for example, the fiber network runs right through the community, does go to the Frontier Collegiate there, but it doesn't go to anybody's home. So kids can't keep up. And we saw that during the pandemic, that there was no way that they could be doing their schoolwork at home the way kids in the city could. So while Frontier did get a boost in some funding and was able to convince MTS to tie them in, seeing as the line was right there, we know that whatever they got under this proposal would not be sufficient. How many schools in Frontier School Division are already running without the required number of teachers? Because they can't afford to pay them, they can't afford to pay them enough to attract them, they can't afford to pay them enough to make sure that the exorbitant cost of living in those northern communities is recognized in the teacher salary. So while the government did recognize that maybe Frontier deserved a little bit, it wasn't enough. So the question becomes, once again, do Manitobans trust that if this government, if this PC government, if this Stephenson government gets reelected, that they won't bring back a plan like this that underfunds school divisions? At the same time, they're cutting checks to millionaires and billionaires, which takes money directly out of school divisions' ability to pay their bills. We know that the Flin Flon School Division is going to be in trouble because of the grant in lieu funding that's gone down. So thank goodness we caught this in time to be able to stop it. This
The member's time has expired. The honourable member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I appreciate the opportunity and being able to rise this afternoon. And I'm going to choose to look at this piece of legislation in an optimistic way, as I love being able to stand in these chambers and speak to education here in the province of Manitoba. And I see education as one of those departments that really make being an MLA one of the best jobs in the world because of the roles we get to play within schools, within our communities. I know in the community of Tyndall Park alone, I've got Waterford Springs School, I've got Meadows West School, Stanley Knowles School, Prairie Rose, Shaughnessy Park, Tyndall Park School, and Garden Grove School. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe we even have another school coming to Tyndall Park, which is exceptionally exciting. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I choose to talk about the schools because all of us MLAs have opportunities to go into the schools quite frequently throughout the years. And I know many of us go into the schools in February to celebrate I Love to Read Month. And again, this is one of my favorite things to do as an MLA. It's such an opportunity to get into our communities, to get into the schools, to hear from the students firsthand. And you know, one of the things I always share and I say to all the students is, and pretend you're one of the students, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'll say to you, you're my boss. Technically, it is my job to represent you inside of the Manitoba Legislature, and it's such an honor to be able to do that. And I often talk with the students about what provincial issues are, and we'll talk about municipal issues and federal issues as well. But children love to learn what they actually have a lot of say on here in the province of Manitoba. You know, I've talked to students for maybe not hours, but for quite a long time about extending gym classes, for example. They seem to all love gym class, so it's always a hot topic. And I've learned a lot from students during I Love to Read Month about YouTube channels and how they all, a lot of students now, they want to be what's called a YouTuber. This wasn't even a career when I was still in school, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So I Love to Read Month is just one of the opportunities where many of us MLAs get to go into the schools within our communities. Another one is graduations. And graduations and farewells, they're coming up quickly. It allows for us to go and congratulate so many of the students who are moving on to different paths and different schools. I know some of us, we do scholarships for students as well. We try to help them get a foot up for different opportunities, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I know over the last couple of years, I've even had the opportunity to go into schools on the Day of Truth and Reconciliation. And I reflect really fondly on this past year where I had the opportunity to go into Meadows West School specifically, and all of the children were in the assembly or in the gymnasium for a big assembly. And they were sitting on all four sides, north, south, west, and east, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And they all took turns talking about their commitments for truth and reconciliation. It was incredibly heartwarming and inspiring. And I think we could take a page from what they do in the schools and talk about that here inside of the Manitoba Legislature. Now, I only have a couple of minutes remaining. I know we need to move on here at 4 p.m. But I did just want to say that we need to be respectful of our teachers. Our teachers have done so much for us, not only over the last few years, but we think about the pandemic in particular and the flexibility and their adaptability. Oftentimes teachers were having to pay for school supplies out of their own pockets. We can think about groups like the Manitoba Teachers Association, like MAFTI, Manitoba Filipino Teachers Association. We can think about the Child Nutrition Council. All of these groups and associations have big roles within education here in the province of Manitoba. And there's a lot more we can be doing at a provincial level to be supporting them, to be showing our respect to them, and ensuring that children here in Manitoba have the best education available to them, have a safe place to go for their education here in Manitoba. And these are just a couple of things I would love to be able to elaborate a little bit more on, but I'll leave my remarks at that here this afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Kiiwetinoong.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair, for the opportunity to share a few words on the Opposition Day motion of the day here today. We have brought forward that is condemning the government for trying to hide its new education funding model. And the conversation that's been happening over the last couple of weeks is exactly that. Manitobans feel that this is now kind of the hidden plan of the PCs, and I'm sure somebody's left it on the fax machine over there somewhere, and they're wondering how it got out. But the fact of the matter is, Manitobans had the right to know. Manitobans have always had the right to know, educators have the right to know, and students have the right to know exactly what this means for their schools, for their constituencies, for their areas and their communities. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's devastating. The cuts that are...
Order, please. When this matter is again before the House, the honourable member for Kiiwetinoong will have 9 minutes remaining. As previously indicated, the time being 4 p.m., I'm now interrupting this debate to put the question on the remaining report stage amendments. Okay. In accordance with our rules, these report stage amendments will be considered without further debate or amendment, with the exception of the leave request, which we'll get to in a second. As well, the House will not adjourn until all of the applicable questions have been put on the report stage amendments for the remaining specified bills. And in accordance with our rules, all matters of privilege and points of order are deferred until after these actions have been concluded. If I can just ask a page for a glass of water, that'd be great. For each report stage amendment, the sponsor will move the motion and have 1 minute to explain its purpose, after which the Speaker will put the question immediately. So I will now call the report stage amendments in the order listed on the order paper, beginning with Clause 4 of Bill 10, and I recognize the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I move, seconded by the Minister of Advanced Education and Training, that Bill 10 be amended in the part of Clause 4 before Clause A by striking out January 1st, 2023 and substituting January 1st, 2022.
It has been moved by the Honourable Minister of Finance, seconded by the Honourable Minister of Advanced Education and Training, that Bill 10 be amended in the part of Clause 4 before Clause A by striking out January 1st, 2023 and substituting January 1st, 2022. The report stage amendment is in order. The Honourable Minister of Finance with 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is in terms of the social responsibility fee for cannabis retailers, which has been set at 6%. The original bill was intended to eliminate that 6%. What this amendment does is make that retroactive to January 1st of 2022. retailers came to committee, and we heard loud and clear that they wanted support in the industry. Our government is continuing to support the retail cannabis through the private sector, and this will provide them close to $10 million in, I will call it, relief from the 6% fee. So I'm sure the retail community will be quite happy to allow this resolution to pass. Thank you very much.
10 seconds, sir.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? Agreed and so ordered. I declare the amendment carried. We will now move to the first report stage amendment on Bill 23, Clause 41J. I recognize the honourable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 23 be amended in Clause 41J by adding, in quotation marks, or severely impaired adaptive behavior despite the individual in question having an intelligence quotient score over 75, end of quotation marks, before, in quotation marks, but in the proposed definition, intellectual disability.
It has been moved by the honourable member for River Heights, seconded by the honourable member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 23 be amended in Clause 41J by adding, quote, or severely impaired adaptive behavior despite the individual in question having an intelligence quotient score over 75, end quote, before, quote, but, end quote, in their proposed definition, quote, intellectual disability. Thanks. I was just so enjoying the reading of it, I didn't hear it. Sorry. The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this amendment is added so that there will not be discrimination on the basis of age. We have experienced individuals who have come forward where all the evidence suggests that it probably arose before age 18, but it's been hard to prove definitively. We also think that ending discrimination on the basis of age will eliminate the risk of a human rights challenge on the basis of age discrimination.
Thank you, member. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. Yay. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. On division, the honourable member for River Heights, I need to acknowledge you before you. The honourable member for River Heights, please go ahead.
On division, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
On division. It is defeated on division. We will now move to the second report stage proposed amendment to Bill 23. That Bill 23 be... The honourable member for River Heights.
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 23 be amended in Clause 41J by striking out, in quotation marks, both of which manifested before the age of 18 years in the proposed definition, intellectual disability. I got that right?
It has been moved by the honourable member for River Heights, seconded by the honourable member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 23 be dispense. The amendment is in order. The honourable member for River Heights.
This is an amendment which deals with the intellectual disability and includes impaired adaptive behavior, as I have raised in the legislature in petitions previously.
The amendment is in order. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. The amendment is accordingly defeated. We will now move to the first report stage amendment to bill proposed. The Honourable Member for River Heights. The second report stage amendment, proposed amendment to Bill 23 is defeated on division. We now move to the first report stage proposed amendment to Bill 32. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended in Clause 3 by adding the following after the proposed Clause 2.1 for A1 of having existing supports continue without interruption and all supports needed to address the child's physical and mental health and any special needs of the child be provided.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for River Heights, seconded by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended in Clause 3, adding the following after the proposed Clause 2.14a. Dispense. The amendment is in order. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah, the goal of this amendment is to ensure a smooth transition and that there are no gaps in services during the changeover to the new framework.
The amendment is in order. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear no. All those, I declare the amendment is defeated. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
On division, Mr.
The amendment is defeated on division. We now move to the second report stage proposed amendment to Bill 32. That Bill 32, the Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yeah, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended in Clause 3 in the proposed Clause 2.2a by adding, in quotation marks, ensure that the child achieves developmental milestones, and after, in quotation marks, in order to.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for River Heights, seconded by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended in Clause 3 in the proposed Clause 2.2a by adding, quote, ensure that the child achieves developmental milestones and, end quote, after, quote, in order to, end quote. The Honourable Member for River Heights. The motion is in order.
Mr. Speaker, this amendment is to make sure that it's clear that one of the goals of caring for a child who is in the care of Child and Family Services be that the child achieves developmental milestones.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favour of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
On division, Mr. Speaker.
The amendment is accordingly defeated on division. We now move to the third report stage proposed amendment to Bill 32. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended in Clause 21 by adding the following after the proposed Clause 13.25J. The supports to address the child's mental health, and educational needs, by adding the following after the proposed Clause 13.44F, the supports to address the child's mental health, and educational needs.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for River Heights, seconded by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended in Clause 21A by adding the following after the proposed Clause 13 dispense. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yes.
It is in order. The amendment is in order. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, this clause is added to ensure that for a child in Child and Family Services care, that the supports to address the child's mental health, and education needs are provided.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The amendment is accordingly defeated. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park.
I need to call the amendment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the amendment was defeated. Okay, we're now going to move to the fourth proposed report stage amendment to Bill 32, and I recognize the Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended in Clause 55 by adding the following after the proposed subsection 28.13. Agreement may be in general in application. 28.14. For certainty, the advocate may enter into one agreement with a person or entity in respect of all reviews or investigations under this section.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for River Heights, seconded by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 32 be amended to Clause 55 by adding the following after the proposed subsection 28.1 subsection 3. Agreement may be general in application. 28.1 subsection 4. For certainty, the advocate may enter into one agreement with a person or entity in respect of all reviews or investigations under this section. The amendment is in order. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Yes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this clause is added at the request of the Manitoba Advocate for Children and Youth. She specifically requested that there be the possibility of having a single agreement with an agency or organization such that there wouldn't need to be individual agreements with every child that was involved. This is a may. It doesn't mean that an organization has to do this, but it allows it to happen and would greatly facilitate the work of the Children's Advocate. Thank you.
The amendment, I already mentioned the amendment is in order. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. I declare the amendment lost, defeated. We will now move to the first report stage proposed amendment to Bill 35. The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
I move, seconded by the Member for River Heights, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by replacing subclause A4 of the definition professional misconduct in the proposed section 8.1 with the following. For psychological harm to the pupil or child where the act A discriminates unreasonably on the basis of any characteristic referred to in subsection 9(2) of the Human Rights Code, B could reasonably be expected to have a lasting harmful effect on the pupil or child, or C is part of repeated conduct that could reasonably be expected to cause the pupil or child to be humiliated or intimidated.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, seconded by the Honourable Member for River Heights, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by replacing subclause A4 of the definition professional misconduct in the proposed section 8.1 with the following. 4. Psychological harm to the pupil or child where the act A discriminates unreasonably on the basis of any characteristic referred to in subsection 9, subsection 2 of the Human Rights Code. B, could reasonably be expected to have a lasting harmful effect on the pupil or child. Or C, is part of repeated conduct that could reasonably be expected to cause the pupil or child to be humiliated or intimidated. The amendment is in order. The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This amendment is amending significant emotional harm in the definition of professional misconduct. We replace significant emotional harm with psychological harm with 3 factors because we want to see a more objective ruling on this type of harm. We don't want to have a situation where significant emotional harm is ruled upon in a subjective manner, which could damage the reputation of a teacher.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The amendment is accordingly defeated. I see 2 people standing. The Honourable Member for River Heights?
On division.
The amendment is defeated on division. We will now move to the second report stage proposed amendment to Bill 35. I recognize the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
I move, seconded by the member for River Heights, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by adding the following after the proposed Clause 8.121C. C1. The complaint or report discriminates unreasonably on the basis of any characteristic referred to in subsection 9.2 of the Human Rights Code.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, seconded by the Honourable Member for River Heights, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by adding the following after the proposed Clause 8.12 subsection 1 subsection C. C1. Dispense. The amendment is in order. The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This amendment adds to the legislation that the Commissioner may decide not to take further action on a complaint if the Commissioner determines that the complaint discriminates unreasonably on a teacher based on characteristics set out in 9.2 of the Human Rights Code.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The amendment is accordingly defeated. The Honourable Member for River Heights?
Yeah, on division, Mr. Speaker.
The amendment is accordingly defeated on division. We now move to the third report stage proposed amendment to Bill 35. And I recognize the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
I move, seconded by the member for River Heights, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by adding the following after the proposed Clause 8.191C. C1. The complaint or report that had led to the investigation discriminates unreasonably on the basis of any characteristic referred to in subsection 9.2 of the Human Rights Code.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, seconded by the Honourable Member for Dispense. The amendment is in order. The Honourable Member for Tyndall Park.
Similar to my last RSA, at the conclusion of an investigation, the Commissioner may decide not to take further action on a complaint if they determine that the complaint that led to an investigation was made from a place of discrimination based on characteristics set out in the Human Rights Code. RSA 2 and 3 will give the Commissioner the discretion to help prevent teachers from being targeted by complaints that may be discriminatory based on characteristics set out in the Human Rights Code.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The amendment is accordingly defeated. The honourable member for River Heights.
On division.
The amendment is accordingly defeated on division. We will now move. Yes. We will now proceed with 3 report stage amendments for from the member for River Heights. Let's start with the first report stage proposed amendment to Bill 35. The honourable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by striking out, but not limited to, in the part before Clause A of the definition professional misconduct in the English version of the proposed Section 8.1.
It has been moved by the honourable member for River Heights, seconded by the honourable member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by striking out, quote, but not limited to, end quote, in the part before Clause A of the definition, quote, professional misconduct, end quote, in the English version of the proposed Section 8.1. The amendment is in order. The honourable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the reason for this amendment is that the words "but not limited to" could be interpreted very, very broadly, and it is designed to make sure that what is addressed is professional misconduct and not a whole range of other items. Thank you.
The amendment is in order. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. The amendment is accordingly defeated. Honourable member for River Heights.
On division, Mr.
The amendment
Speaker.
is defeated on division. We now move to the second report stage proposed amendment to Bill 35, brought forward by the member for River Heights. The honourable member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8 by adding the following at the end of the proposed Section 8.111, the Commissioner must not take further action on the complaint or report if it was made anonymously and must, if reasonably practicable, notify the person who made the complaint or report that no further action will be taken. By adding B, by adding is prohibited from taking further action under Section 8.11 or before decides in the proposed Clause 8.141A.
It has been moved by the honourable member for River Heights, seconded by the honourable member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8A by adding the following at the end of the proposed Section 8.11. The Commissioner must not take further action on the complaint or report if it was made anonymously and must, if reasonably practicable, dispense. The amendment is in order. The honourable member for River Heights.
The intent of this amendment is to ensure that if it's an anonymous complaint, it is not proceeded with. The concern is that these may be anonymous complaints which are frivolous, and if they don't have a person attached to them, that they should not be further evaluated.
The amendment is in order. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. I declare the amendment defeated. The honourable member for River Heights.
On division, Mr. Speaker.
The amendment is accordingly defeated on division. We now move to the third report stage proposed amendment to Bill 35 brought forward by the Honourable Member for River Heights. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move, seconded by the MLA for Tyndall Park, that Bill 35 be amended in Clause 8A by adding the following after the proposed Clause 8.291D. D.1. Determine that the investigated teacher requires reasonable accommodation because of a physical or mental disability in order to carry out the professional responsibilities of a teacher. B, by replacing the proposed subsection 8.323 with the following exception. 8.323. In any of the following circumstances, the Commissioner may decide not to make the written decision public or may direct the Director of Certification to make public only a summary of the decision that excludes all identifying information. If the Commissioner considers that making the decision public would cause significant hardship to a person who is harmed, abused, or exploited by the investigated teacher. B, if a finding has been made under Clause 8.291D or D.1. C, if the Commissioner considers that making the decision public is otherwise not in the public interest. C, by adding or D.1 after made under Clause 8.291D in the proposed subsection 8.324 as amended by the committee, or as amended at committee.
It has been moved by the Honourable Member for River Heights, seconded by the Honourable Member for Tyndall Park, that Bill 35 be amended in clause dispense. The amendment is in order. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Speaker, the amendment does two things. One, it ensures that there's an attempt to provide reasonable accommodation with a teacher with a physical or mental disability. That a teacher who is in a wheelchair is allowed to continue with appropriate accommodation. A teacher who has lymphedema can continue with accommodation. That a teacher who has a reading disorder, for example dyslexia, can have reasonable accommodation in order to carry out professional responsibilities. And the second part of this is to make sure that there's reasonable privacy protection for teachers.
Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the amendment? I hear a no. All those in favor of the amendment, please say yay. All those opposed, please say nay. In my opinion, the nays have it. I declare the amendment defeated. The Honourable Member for River Heights.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, on division.
The amendment is accordingly defeated on division. That ends the proposed report stage amendments for this afternoon. As previously indicated, we will now resume debate on the Opposition Day motion sponsored by the Honourable Member for Transcona, which is standing in the name of the Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong, who has 9 minutes remaining. The Honourable Member for Kiiwetinoong to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair, for the chance to continue on with sharing a few thoughts on the Opposition Day motion of the day, which is condemning the government for trying to hide its new education funding model. And as I ended off with my comments a little earlier in the afternoon, it was about hiding and about what this model is intended to do. This model is intended to kind of take away from the inability of this government to actually properly fund our education system here in Manitoba. And Manitobans and students and teachers and education professionals have the right to know exactly what this means for them. And I know that when this came to light, it was something that the government was, oh, don't worry about that, that's not going to happen. Well, the simple question is, well, what is in fact going to happen? And then there's been no alternative, because we know this is in fact the intent. This is in fact the intention of this government. And the fact that they're now trying to kind of delay and hold off disclosing exactly what the plan is till after the election is again trying to kind of pull one over on the people of Manitoba. And that is just shameful. Just reading through the list, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 11 million in Seven Oaks School Division, 10 million from Louis Riel School Division, 8.5 from St. James Assiniboine, 4.5 for Pembina Trails, over 2 million from Winnipeg School Division, over 2 million from Borderland School Division, over 1.5 million from Flin Flon School Division, nearly 3 million from the Interlake School Division, nearly 8 million from Lord Selkirk School Division, over 4 million from Pembina Trails, over 2 million from Southwest Horizon, and nearly 8 million from the Sunrise School Division. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is significant. And time and time again, you talk about the front line, in the classroom, at the bedside. So when we talk about education and the front line and what this means to the classroom, this is devastating. But again, it's not something that's being advertised by this government because they simply don't want this to be known. They don't want this to be known because they're going to try and trick Manitobans into giving them another term. And we know what the real intent is, to again carry on that legacy of cutting education, of cutting health care. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, time and time again, we've referred this kind of, the architect of these cuts has been Brian Pallister. And again, it's a name that just doesn't want to be mentioned in this building. But the fact of the matter is, that's exactly what this is. This is the blueprint of Brian Pallister. And the minister stood up and talked about failed education ministers in the past, but there's also 4 education ministers failing under this current government. And that's the reality also. Again, another question that was asked, when did you all of a sudden hate Bill 64? And no response. No kind of, oh, we're going to flip the page. All members opposite voted in favor of that. They brought that forth and they carried that forward. And they were the champions of Bill 64. Then all of a sudden they're not. Because what happened, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Manitobans spoke out. Manitobans' voices wanted and needed and made themselves heard. And this funding model is not reflective of those voices. It is clearly not reflective, because what school division is going to agree to this? What community is going to agree to this? What educator is going to agree to this? And the fact of the matter is, none of them would. Because this is a significant lack of investment in education. I know government wants to say, oh, we're doing record this, record that, but at the end of the day, it's always a net loss with this government. There's no gain. There's no positive spin they could put on this. The fact they're severely cutting education, and they have since day one. And now you're seeing the cumulative effects of all that going forward. And now they're trying to come out and say, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Nothing but announcements. And now they're even announcing past their due date. So their due date is October the 3rd. And they're trying to make announcements past that. But again, the reality is, this here is the plan. This here is this government's plan. And I know they hated the fact that this came out, and I'm sure they're trying to wonder who left it on the fax machine, who whatever did, and how did that get out there, rather than answering for this. And that's what needs to be said. That's what needs to be addressed to Manitobans, is exactly what the plan is. Because right now, this is the plan that's there. This is the plan that Manitobans see, and this is the plan that Manitobans know that this government is trying to bring forward here in Manitoba. So they're going to get out there time and time again, week in, week out, and make these announcements that are nothing more than that. But the reality is, this is their plan. Their plan of cuts to every school division here in the province, and this is going to affect every student. And there may be individuals, if you have family that are in one community or in one school division, but it's almost a guarantee and a given that you have family or extended family, friends or whatever, loved ones that are in other school divisions and other areas of the province that are affected directly by this situation and are going to be directly affected by this cut. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, what does this mean? This means continuing and rising ratios in the school. We have school divisions now that are, the reality is on paper, this government wants to say the ratio is going to be 12 to 1, 14 to 1, 15 to 1, but the reality is you're in the high 20 to 1 ratios in these schools because of situations just like this, because of chronic underfunding just like this. And this is the plan. Make no mistake about it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is the plan that's being brought forward. And this is the plan that was trying to kind of stay silent. Let's whisper this out there, because it's not really something we want to be able to advertise, because this is the failure. This is an absolute failure by this government, and they know it. That's why the delay. That's why the hesitation to bring this forward and have these discussions.
and instead try and re-announce the same announcements over and over again. Try and reaffirm the announcements. Try to, again, advertise the announcements. Why not better use that money in the school? Why not better use those funds that you're using for whatever you're trying to do to promote yourself to actually make it to the classroom so we can have more positive outcomes in our school? The reality is, under this government, that is significantly declining, and it's progressively gone worse since 2016. And now, they're like I said, they're going past their due date. So this is all going to catch up to them. And they know it. They know in October of this year that this is going to become a reality for them. So this is the reality they're putting forward, because they have no alternative but to do this. They have no alternative but to say, we're going to do these record announcements, but not actually record investments. Because at the end of the day, it's always a net loss with this government. There is no positivity. There is no moving forward. We're not only not moving forward, we're moving backward. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, all this is doing, all this motion today is doing, is just calling that out. It's calling this government to account. It's telling them to be responsible, be accountable to the people of Manitoba. And if this is the model that's not there, then show us the model. Show us what's there, because right now, this is the document that you have. This is the document that you're working from. This is your blueprint for education here in Manitoba. If you happen to receive another term, we know what's going to happen here. Again, this is something they're not going to announce, something they're not going to talk about today, because they know what this means. They know what this means for Manitobans. They know this means hurtful cuts to the education system here in Manitoba. And Manitobans will not stand for that. So as legislators, it's our responsibility to let Manitoba know the reality of what this government is doing for them and what this government is not doing for them, how this government is hindering them, how this government is hurting the education system. And that's what this model does. How this government believes cutting, just in the list that I announced, almost $64 million to the education system, how can they understand that that's a positive thing? Again, a net loss at the end of the day. And every aspect of this government is always a net loss. They're going to come out and announce an election year, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, a record amount, we're going to double whatever we're going to do. But the fact of the matter is you quadrupled the cuts. So doubling anything really doesn't matter, because it doesn't have the effect. And Manitobans have the right to know, and we've continually asked that of this government. Show the model, because right now we know what this model is, and we know what this model means for the education system, and it's devastating under this government. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to start by thanking my colleague, the member from Transcona, for bringing forward this important motion today, which of course condemns this PC government for working to hide their new education funding model. My colleague from Notre Dame earlier today stated something, I thought she did a great job stating this really clearly, that Manitoban kids deserve the best education we can give them. They deserve the smallest classroom sizes we can give them so we can ensure that they get the support and attention that they deserve. They deserve to go to schools that have the EAs that they need to make sure that they can get the help they need if they can't get the support they need from their teacher, or they need access to psychologists and social workers. They deserve to have access to those supports. And they deserve to have access to great programs that will help them thrive and reach their fullest potential. Programs like IB programs that, unfortunately, in St. James have now been cut due to this PC government's cuts to education. And of course, again, as my colleague from Notre Dame stated earlier, they deserve to be able to go to school and get access to a warm meal if needed so that they can learn and not go to school hungry. That's critical. Unfortunately, over the last 7 years, this PC government has made it clear that they don't agree with these assertions. They don't agree with those statements. And instead, they made it clear that they're far more focused on cutting education and reducing investments in our kids than they are in helping them to become all they can be. Now, PCs don't like to hear the facts. When we start talking about their cuts to education, there's always a lot of moaning and groaning on the other side. And I understand it's hard for them to hear the truth about the impacts they've had on kids in this province. But it's important that we do speak the truth in this chamber, and so Here's the truth, Mr. Deputy Speaker. For the last 3 years, or for the 3 years prior to 2022, the province's core operating funding for education was cut by $36 million. That's a fact. And in 2016, the province used to pay 62.4% of operating costs for education, and in 21-22, that has now fallen to 56.4%. So that's the reality when it comes to education funding in Manitoba. That's the reality that our kids are facing, that's the reality families are facing when it comes to education under a PC government. Cuts, cuts, and more cuts. And that brings us to the matter at hand here today, which is that after years and years of cuts to our education system and disinvestment from our kids, the PCs are clearly are planning on taking an even bigger step in making cuts from education in Manitoba. And we have the proof of that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We've brought that proof forward in the form of a document which we did bring forward in this House, and of course we raised in media. And I thank my colleague, the member for Transcona, for raising that concern and helping Manitobans to get a better sense of what this government was planning. We know this government desperately tried to hide that education funding model. We know that they really did not want Manitobans to get a line of sight on their plans. And the reason is because that document that we brought forward spells out in no uncertain terms exactly what it is that this government intends to do, which is to make further cuts, devastating cuts, to school divisions across the province. Here's what that document tells us in no uncertain terms, and I'm going to steal the note here from my colleague. Under the new model, the PC cuts would include $11 million in cuts to Seven Oaks School Division, $10 million in cuts to Louis Riel School Division, $8.5 million in cuts to my local school division in St. James, $4.5 million in cuts from Pembina Trail School Division, over $2 million from Winnipeg School Division, $2 million from Borderland School Division, $3 million from the Interlake School Division, $8 million from Lord Selkirk School Division, $4 million from Pembina Trail School Division, and over $2 million from Southwest Horizon School Division. Cuts, cuts, and more cuts. More of the same. This won't surprise Manitobans because they've seen this over the last 7 years, but getting a line of sight on this document that we revealed that shows their plans going forward should make Manitobans very nervous. And I know when I speak with Manitobans in my community that they are deeply concerned about this government's plans and what they're learning and what's been revealed in that document. You know, these cuts to our education system, these proposed cuts, are going to do untold damage, and we know that our system, of course, has already sustained years and years of cuts under this PC government. These proposed cuts will only compound damage that they've created over the last 7 years. And I want to talk briefly here about some of the realities faced by school divisions as a result of their cuts over the last many years. Starting with Seven Oaks, we know recently that divisional leadership made it clear that they're needing to look at reducing between 25 to 50 teaching staff in that division. That's a shocking number of teachers. We know that due to budgetary shortfalls and growing enrollment, that they're being forced to examine other potential cuts to other key programs, swimming programs, and other programs that offer basic life skills to students in that division. Hanover School Division, they've cut, or they intend to cut 10.5 teaching positions and $290,000 from their maintenance budget. More on the impacts of PC cuts to education. In River East Transcona, they're being forced to go to the bank to ask for a loan to cover some of their costs. This PC government, because of their cuts, are forcing school divisions now to go to banks, financial institutions, to beg them to give them loans so they can continue to meet the needs of their students. Interlake School Division had to cut 6.4 teaching positions and more staffing cuts to come. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's absolutely mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling that in an era of growing enrollment and growing needs for our kids, when our needs for our kids have never been greater, that this government is forcing school divisions to cut teachers. That's unconscionable. It's absolutely ridiculous. And what they're doing what are they doing while divisions are being forced to make these cuts? They're writing huge checks to some of the richest people in the world, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As my colleagues have shown, they're writing huge checks to Galen Weston. They're writing huge checks to the owners of Walmart. They're writing huge checks to the owners of the Koch brothers. They're writing huge checks to a number of huge out-of-province companies, all while they force some of our school divisions to go to the bank to beg for money so they can meet the needs of their kids in their division. That is enraging to Manitobans. And I know when I speak with folks in my own constituency, in every corner of St. James, and they hear about the fact that this government is sending those huge checks to these big corporations, out-of-province corporations, and using dollars that were supposed to go to fund education, that makes them very angry, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And something tells me that this government is going to pay a very big price when we come to October for this and a number of their other terrible decisions that they've made. Our education system can't sustain any more cuts, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We know when we listen to teachers, we know the strain that they've been placed under as a result of the decisions that this government has made. You compound that with the impacts of COVID and the stress and struggles they went through, the stress and struggles they were forced to undergo as a result of this government's attempt to ram through Bill 64 and the trauma that that put people through. We know that they can't sustain any more of these cuts. And we know that our kids have also been pushed to the limit. And now this government is proposing, we're already seeing, as I've outlined in a number of divisions, bigger and bigger and bigger classrooms. Because what do divisions do when they have cuts? Most of the expenses, of course, are related to staffing and paying teacher salaries. The only way to make do, the only option they have, is to cut teachers and make those classrooms grow and grow and grow. Our kids deserve better. Our kids deserve much better. They deserve a government that truly values education, that values investment in education, that values the work being done by our teachers, by our educational assistants. And we deserve a government that sees the potential in every kid to do something great. Manitobans will not get that from this PC government. Our NDP caucus will continue to fight for kids in this province. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
The honourable member for Wolseley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to be able to stand and add a few words on the record on this very important Opposition Day motion to condemn the government for trying to hide its new education funding model. It's been a little bit of a theme in the legislature today. What words get said behind closed doors, what secret plans get put in place, and how the PCs actually try to present themselves publicly during this election year. So just as the PCs don't want voters to know that, key leaders in their organization believe that educators are just brainwashing their kids, they also didn't want the secret funding model to get released. But it has, and so it's important that we have this opportunity to bring attention to it and to be able to discuss clearly. I know many of my colleagues have outlined all of the various cuts that have been made, but I think it's important just to quickly review that under this new model, the PC cuts would include $11 million cut from Seven Oaks School Division, $10 million cut from Louis Riel School Division, $8.5 million cut from St. James's Assiniboia School Division, $4.5 million cut from Pembina Trails School Division, over $2 million cut from Winnipeg School Division, over $2 million cut from Borderlands School Division, over $1.5 million from Flin Flon School Division, nearly $3 million cut from Interlake School Division, nearly $8 million cut from Lord Selkirk School Division, over $4 million cut from Pembina Trails School Division, over $2 million cut from Southwest Horizon School Division, and nearly $8 million cut from Sunrise School Division. We all know these cuts means fewer teachers, fewer EAs, more students in classrooms, less support for parents and families. But it also means lots of important things that happen in the school system could be cut. We've seen the loss of librarians in the public school system across the province in a wide variety of school divisions. A loss of librarians means a loss of the knowledge
the exact type of person we need to make really good decisions about what kind of books are in public libraries. And we've also seen cuts to nutrition programs. We've seen cuts for other activities. And so I'm grateful that I have the chance to highlight that today. And I want to thank my colleague for bringing forward, my colleague from Transcona for bringing forward this very important motion. And thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Are there any other members wishing to speak? Is the House ready for the question? Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? I hear a no. All those in favor of the motion, please say yay. Yay! All those opposed, please say nay. Nay! In my opinion, the nays have it. The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Miigwech, a recorded vote, please.
A recorded vote having been called, call in the members. Order, please. For the information of all members, for those who are with us virtually, we are required to conduct votes in a different manner than during normal sittings. So for members in the House, the vote will be conducted in a manner similar to previous practice. For this part of the vote, those in favor will stand to be counted first, followed by those against. Once the page states the name of the member standing to be counted, the clerk will acknowledge that the member has voted by repeating the member's name rather than saying aye. Once the count in the House is complete, we will conduct an alphabetical roll call of members participating virtually. For this step, the page will call each remote member's name alphabetically, and then each remote member must audibly state their vote, responding with either "I vote yes" or "I vote no." The clerk will then respond with the member's name, followed by yes or no. Finally, after the bells stop ringing for any votes, the moderator and the table will need to take a moment to verify all members listed as remote are actually present on screen and in their seats and therefore eligible to vote. Just got to get something organized here. The question before the House is the motion put forward by the Honourable Member for Transcona, seconded by the Honourable Member for Concordia, that the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for trying to hide, dispense. Do the members want the motion read? That the Legislative Assembly of Manitoba condemn the provincial government for trying to hide its new education funding model that would severely and negatively impact the funding by millions of dollars for school divisions like Pembina Trails, Winnipeg, St. James Assiniboia, Seven Oaks, Louis Riel, Lord Selkirk, Interlake, and much more. We will now proceed with the vote. All those in favor, please rise.
Okay.
Mr. Canoe,
Mr. Canoe,
Mr. Altmaier,
Mr. Altimer,
Mr. Weed,
Mr. Weed,
Emily Fontaine,
Emily Fontaine,
Mrs. Smith Point Douglas,
Mrs. Smith Point Douglas,
Mr. Vosley,
Mr. Voslev,
Mr. Moses,
Mr. Moses,
Mr. Sala,
Mr. Sala,
Emily Marcelino,
Emily Marcelino,
Miss Naylor,
Ms. Naylor,
Miss Lamoureux,
Ms. Lamoureux,
Emily Lindsay,
MLA Lindsay,
Mr. Malloway,
Mr. Malloway,
Mr. Bushy,
Mr. Bushy,
Mr. Redhead,
Mr. Redhead,
Mr. Sandu,
Mr. Sandu,
Honorable Mr. Gerard.
Honorable Mr. Gerard.
All those opposed to the motion, please rise.
Honorable Mr. Gertson,
Honorable Mr. Gertson,
Honorable Mr. Cullen,
Honorable Mr. Cullen,
Honorable Ms. Gordon,
Honorable Ms. Gordon,
Honorable Ms. Squires,
Honorable Ms. Squires,
Honorable Mr. Iwasco,
Honorable Mr. Iwasco,
Honorable Mr. Smith Lajmode,
Honorable Mr. Smith Lajmodier,
Honorable Mr. Johnston Assiniboia,
Honorable Mr. Johnston Assiniboia,
Honorable Mr. Nesbitt,
Honorable Mr. Nesbitt,
Honorable Ms. Morley Lecomte,
Honorable Ms. Morley Lecomte,
Honorable Mr. Khan,
Honorable Mr. Khan,
Honorable Mrs. Guimard,
Honorable Mrs. Guimard,
Honorable Mr. Wharton,
Honorable Mr. Wharton,
Honorable Mr. Johnson, Interlake Gimli,
Honorable Mr. Johnson, Interlake Gimli,
Honorable Mr. Panook,
Honorable Mr. Panyuk,
Honorable Mr. Teitzma,
Honorable Mr. Teitzma,
Mr. Mikuleski,
Mr. Mikuleski,
Mr. Smook,
Mr. Smook,
Mr. Helwer,
Mr. Helwer,
Honorable MLA Klein,
Honorable MLA Klein,
Mr. Martin,
Mr. Martin,
Mrs. Cox,
Mrs. Cox,
Mr. Isleifson,
Mr. Isleifson,
Mr. Wishart,
Mr. Wishart,
Mr. Peterson,
Mr. Peterson,
Mr. Wochuk,
Mr. Wochuk,
Mr. Ginter.
Mr. Ginter.
We will now conduct the alphabetical roll call of members participating virtually, asking each remote member to audibly state their vote, responding with either "I vote yes" or "I vote no." I'd also remind members to unmute their mics only when they are recognized and then immediately mute them again once they have declared their vote.
Mr. Brar,
I vote yes.
Mr. Brar votes yes.
Mr. Eichler,
I vote no.
Mr. Eichler votes no.
Mr. Legacy?
I vote no.
Mr. Lagasse votes no. Well done.
Well done.
Yeas 18, nays 28.
I declare the motion is defeated. The hour being past 5 p.m., this House is adjourned and stands adjourned until Monday at 1:30 p.m.